Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Oh my God, I cannot believe it's Friday already. I think screwed up the broadcast on Rumble for today, but that's all right. Welcome to Happy Hour. It's been a busy day, all right. I just went to the beer store and traffic getting back was so ridiculous, and it just took me a lot longer than I thought it would. So I'm sorry to the people who normally watch on Rumble. I forgot to fix the streaming thing. Rumble has a weird thing where you have to change the streaming thing every single time you stream on Rumble. It is a giant pain in the ass. It is the only platform that does this. It screws me up every time. Anyway, we're not going to worry about that right now because I still have my second channel, youtube.com/actively unwoke up and running. I still have Odyssey up and running. I still have Rockfin up and running. I still have Gitter up and running. And it ain't my fault Rumble can't get their act together and work like every other effing video platform on the internet. That's not my problem for today. That's Dave Rubin's problem to solve. That is not my problem to solve. But guys, welcome to Happy Hour. A happy hour is a time where we sit back, kick up our feet, drink some drinks, and watch a woke video and see how they talk and what they talk about when they don't think anyone is watching them. And today's video is dedicated to Phil. It is also dedicated to Naruto, who showed me about it, who told me about it rather, and said, Karlyn, this would be a great happy hour video. We're doing it, ladies and gentlemen. Comic books are going queer. We are going to watch Queer Eye for Comic Books, LGBTQ plus voices on IP adaptations for film and movies. We're going to listen to a 2-hour panel of comic book people talking about how they're going to go back into the archive of comic books to redo the characters to make comic books more queer. Now, I don't know anything about comic books. I'm sorry. I know this is disappointing for some people. I have never been into comic books in my life. Okay, I've read a graphic novel here and there because you got to read V for Vendetta, man. It's just the way it goes. You got to read like The Watchmen, things like that. There are some classics. However, I've just never been into comic books. So I have no frame of reference here. I'm really going to be looking to people in the chat who are more into this universe to provide commentary on this. I can provide commentary on woke. I can provide commentary on culture. I can provide commentary on socialism. I can provide commentary kind of trying to decipher some of the leftist language that these people are obviously going to use to explain why they're doing it. But in the realm of comic books, I have no idea. So I'm really going to be looking for some help today. Kino Reviews says they've been doing this for years and sales are down under 30,000 copies sold. Pathetic sales numbers. Yeah, I would say that is pretty pathetic. So guys, that's what we got on tap for today for happy hour. And I hope you're ready to go. Now we've got a couple orders of business before we jump into the stream here today. Number one, we have tomorrow in my community, Bitchcraft. And Bitchcraft is basically an open Zoom where we bitch while we craft. That's what it is. It's a Zoom call where we all bring our crafts. Of course, I will be knitting as the far most superior of all crafts, but you're welcome to do other crafts too. You can crochet, you can quilt, you can sew, you can draw, you can paint, you can clean your gun, you can fold your laundry, you can play video games, you can just come and hang out if you want to. That's cool too, but that's going to be happening tomorrow at 3 p.m. in my community. You can get access to it by joining Locals or Patreon. I'll tell you about that in a second, but that's how you can get invited to Bitchcraft tomorrow and, show up and then spend some time with us. The other thing I want to announce, and this may be a preemptive announcement, but I think the poll is pretty solid. So we were doing a poll in my Locals community to decide which movie to watch for movie night on Sunday. And the poll is still going, so I guess this could change. But I'm pretty sure Scrooged is in the lead right now, and I think it might be an insurmountable lead. So I'm gonna go ahead and call it and say we are watching Scrooged for our movie this week in my supporter Discord. You can join us on Sunday at 8 p.m. and watch the movie with us. And movie night's a fun time, man. We hang out. We do trivia. We talk about the themes in the movie. And of course, Scrooged is a great movie. If you've never seen it, it is a classic. I've probably seen it about 86 times at this point, but come and join us on Sunday in the supporter Discord and watch with us. It's going to be great. And how do you get access to that? Well, you head over to activelyunwoke.com/support. And you can join my Patreon there, anywhere from $5 a month all the way up to $250 a month, depending on how much you like me on any given day or what types of perks you want. And if you don't want to join Patreon, that's totally cool, man. You can join my locals community at $5 a month, $50 a year. You can make a one-time gift. Those two things are going to get access to my supporter Discord, so you can come and join us for movie night, and you can also come and join us for Bitchcraft tomorrow at 3 p.m., which is pretty great. Now, Bot said, I think someone said earlier, I got my voice back. I did like a 4-hour mega stream yesterday where I was talking the whole time, and I got to be honest, my voice is still a little scratchy. It is. But we're going to get through it, and I don't talk as much on happy hour, so it's really going to help me to kind of recover. And of course, that leads me to my next order of business, which is the beer. The beer, which almost made me late. Almost made me late for happy hour because I was coming back from the beer store and I got stuck in traffic. But per usual, I have 4 craft beers here that I've selected, and we're going to talk about what those beers are. I'm a big fan of craft beer for those of you who might be new to me. And guess what? You're going to get to vote on what beer I drink first. Boom says, I saw Mikey was going full re on Twitter. Well, full re is Mike Harlow's perpetual state of being. So I don't think anyone was surprised about that. Metastep, can I join to bitch about my daughter's school pushing gender ideology into the 4th and 5th grade? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And I saw your note about the email Metastep. I'll make sure to check that. I'm assuming you sent it to activelyunwoke@gmail.com. And if you did, I will give that a look. And thank you for sending that along. But yes, you can absolutely join for that. Now, I think I saw a couple super chats coming in. Free bingo square if they say they want to change Superman or Spider-Man to Super Person or Spider Person. Let me get the bingo card up. I don't know that it's going to be a good bingo day, but I'll put bingo card in the chat. You guys can play bingo if you want. There it is. Thank you for reminding me, George. I appreciate it. Murphy's Pool says, Peroni, no, Murphy's Pool, we're not drinking your Italian water beer. That's not going to happen, but I appreciate you. I feel like we had a question for you the other day, Murphy's Pool, in supporter Zoom. It'll come back to me if it's important. Naruto, when they talk about legacy characters in the panel, legacy characters means white characters from the 30s and 40s. Thank you for that. See, Naruto's going to be one of our translators for today. And again, thank you for sending me the panel. I do appreciate it. I think it's going to be great fodder for today. All right, let me show you the beer that I have. The first beer I got purely based on how pretty I thought the can was. I'm going to have to start collecting some of these pretty beer cans. Look at that. That's lovely. I have a phoenix tattooed on my leg, for those who don't know. It doesn't look like this phoenix, but how pretty is that? I was like, oh, I don't even care what this beer is. The can is beautiful. But it is a dark fruit citrus goose, an ale blue with blackberry, blackcurrant, lemon, and coriander. And that's going to be from Collective Arts Creativity. So there's our first option for today. Next option, let me see. Next option is going to be a returning favorite, and I had to get it again. I had to. Birthday cake. This is from Froth Brewing in Buffalo, New York, the maker of the famous lollipop beer. And this is a frosty birthday cake malt beverage with natural flavors. I don't know how birthday cake has natural flavors in it, but that is a birthday cake flavored beer. No, Bot, they don't have Das Hydra anymore. Das Hydra was basically the best beer that's ever been made. If you ever see Das Hydra, you need to pick that up. Next up, another good can. Flamingo with kiwis. See, some of these beer cans are just so creative. You know, this isn't the world of Budweiser anymore. This is a sour ale with kiwi and strawberry. So that's good too. I don't remember what the question was, Murphy's Pool. I'll let you know if it comes back. And the last one I have for today is going to be a coffee porter. This is from Abel Ebenezer Brewing Company, which is actually a brewing company that's it's in the city where I live, the town where I live. I don't even know if you can call this a city, but it's in the town where I live, and they're actually a libertarian brewery. So shout out Abel Ebenezer. They do good stuff. I'm not the biggest IPA person. They're big IPA makers, but I'm looking forward to trying this coffee porter because their beers are usually pretty good. All right, let me put the poll in the chat. Do you want me to start with the Phoenix beer, the dark fruit citrus. Do you want me to start with the birthday cake beer? Do you want me to start with the strawberry kiwi beer? Or, rounding it out, the coffee porter? Vote, let me know which one you guys want me to start with. And in the meantime, please mount that like button for me. We do happy hours on Fridays at 5 p.m. Because why not? We got nothing better to do. Let me just get set up here. Let's see. All right, we're all set to go. Let me see. See, you guys are voting based on the can too. Oh, dark fruit. The Phoenix beer is winning resoundingly. All right, we're going to start with that Phoenix beer. Let me just get all my stuff set up. We can get that pour. All right. Actually, let me put let me make myself big to pour this here beer. Of course, I got my giant wine glass because I drink beer out of a wine glass because I'm fancy like that. I just like the act of drinking out of a wine glass, but I'd prefer beer to wine. So you gotta adapt, man. Got to adapt. We're gonna call it for the poll because it is winning resoundingly. Let's see what this looks like. Oh my god, look how pretty that is. Oh, that's so pretty. Wow. George is making a great point. Dark Fruit Phoenix is also thematically relevant. I think so. Look at the head. Even the head is like, it's like pink. I've never seen that before. Wow. Let me take a sip. Oh, that's real sour. Oh. You know what it tastes like? It tastes like, you know, if you get like a raspberry drizzle over like a cheesecake or something, like that really thick kind of like raspberry sauce that's like a little tart. That's what it tastes like. Good stuff, guys. Cheers. Welcome to happy hour. Let's get this party started. All right. Mount that like button if you're ready to learn how comic books are going queer. We'll make that nice and big for everyone. 2 hours, guys. Hunker down. Get a drink and a snack. Oh, hang on. We got a super chat coming in from Newer too. There's a comic book character called Dark Phoenix. Oh, in what comic book? Isn't that like X-Men? Wasn't there a Phoenix character in X-Men? Maybe that was just the movie. I don't know. That sounds right, though. Yes, a raspberry reduction. That's what it tastes like. Indeed. All right, guys. We got 2 hours to go.
Group of creators and executives and all LGBTQ plus voices here to talk about comic books and comic book adaptations. I really want to thank our subcommittee, Bradley Estrin Barks and Maytal Zahut, who did and put so much energy into getting all of these incredible creatives here. As well as our esteemed moderator, who was also part of the subcommittee, Eric Anthony Glover. Eric was a staff writer and story editor, most recently on CW's Tom Swift.
Oh, and look at this woman down here, Madeline. Madeline's going to be a problem. You know that Madeline's going to be a problem. Everyone knows that Madeline's going to be a problem. This person's going to be a problem too. This Kim person. Probably David's going to be a problem because he has him in his Zoom screen name. The answer to the question is 9 inches on God. That's the answer to a question, Murphy's Pool. I don't know that that's the answer to the question that I had, but that's the answer to a question. Yeah, you could already tell. You can already tell. The woke is wafting off of her.
He's published a graphic novel, Black Star, through Megascope. And just want to pass it off to Eric and take it away.
Thanks so much, Rob. Awesome. It's great to see everyone here. Thank you to the panel.
Wait, is this real? See, I don't know anything about these people, and Boom says, Mags V is a trans activist and only claim to fame is being trans and writing comics. Every project they have been on has massively failed. See, it's like, I don't even know who these people are, and I can zone in on who's going to be the most toxic among them. How funny is that? Oh, captions. Yes, sorry, J-Habs. I'll turn on captions. My bad.
Thanks for being here. I know, like the writers who have attended this event, I hold you all in very high esteem, and I'm just so glad that you made the time for this. Thank you so much. Also, a shout out to Rob Foreman and Spiro and JJ for making nights like this possible at all. Without you, none of this would be running. I want to thank the straight people who have somehow managed to end up here. You guys are the real heroes. And
straight people are
not
heroes
coming
now.
Here would have been homophobic anyway. So salute to you.
Seriously, he must have been
read some
joking. Tell me he was
highly abridged
joking.
Versions of our panelists' bios. They are very long because these people are very accomplished. But right after that, we'll get into our discussion. We have
oh God, the bios for these people is going to take like half hour.
First of all, we're going to start with Roberto Aguirre Sacasa. Roberto is a screenwriter, award-winning playwright, and comic book writer. He serves as showrunner for Riverdale on the CW. He also executive produced Netflix's Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and the CW's Katie Keene.
Oh God, this is about to ruin things that I like.
From Archie Comics, where Roberto serves as chief creative officer. Welcome, Roberto.
Oh no, this is gonna ruin.
I'm so happy.
I like the Sabrina stuff.
See everyone. Thank you.
Well, the first couple seasons anyway.
Eleanor Jean is a queer trans woman and frequently does queer trans stuff like fighting for her basic ass rights and roller skating. In the comic space, she's developing the TV adaptation of Kim and Kim with author
this is
Mags
going to be awful, isn't it?
Who's also here with us tonight. Eleanor has also worked as a co-producer and writer on Netflix's Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Oh no.
Welcome, Eleanor.
No.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for being here. Thomas Page Maccabee. His most recent TV credit is a consulting producer on The Umbrella Academy, where with showrunner Steve Blackman, he constructed and wrote the transition narrative for Elliot Page's character Victor in season 3. So awesome.
Is anyone else already getting a feeling of doom come over them that this is probably going to be one of the most woke bullshit panels we've ever seen in our lives? James Jones says, Magdalene is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Okay. No shocker there. I liked Riverdale. Okay, I haven't watched Riverdale lately. I used to love I will say like the Archie comics are probably the only comics that I have familiarity with. I would always like get those Archie comics at the supermarket. Like I would try to sneak them in my mother's like freaking like a shopping cart or something like that. I fucking love the Archie comics. And then I thought Riverdale was like okay. Like it wasn't like it's the CW, so it's like it is what it is. But like I thought Riverdale was pretty good for the seasons that I watched. I haven't watched in a long time. And then they like I feel like this is gonna ruin it for me.
He's written for the L Word, Generation Q, and Tales of the City, and is currently writing a podcast for Audible about a trans man with supernatural abilities. Welcome, Thomas.
Thanks. Great to be here.
Oh God.
Great to have you. James Tynan IV is an Eisner New York Times bestselling author and publisher of comic books. He is best known for horror stories like Something is Killing the Children at Boom Studios, The Department of Truth at Image Comics, The Nice House on the Lake at DC Black Label, and manga-inspired young adult stories like the 2021 GLAAD Media Award nominee Wind and the 2017 GLAAD Media Award winner
It's all your
Woods at Boom
fault.
Studios. Welcome, James.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, full disclosure, James and I went to Sarah Lawrence College together, and before knowing him,
Men should not brag about going to Sarah Lawrence College.
I knew the most about comic books. And now James has won roughly like 78 Eisners, which are comic book awards. So James, I want to congratulate you on being well on your way to knowing more about comic books than I do. So I really appreciate how far you've come. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Mags. Mags is an Eisner winner. Good Lord. Oh, I'm sorry. Eisner nominated. It's fucking close and it's great. Mags DiMaggio is the Eisner and GLAAD Media Award nominated writer of Eternity Girl, Morning in America, and Kim and Kim. Kim and Kim was nominated for the 2017 Eisner Award for Best Limited Series and GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding Comic Book. In 2017, Mags was chosen to take part in DC Comics Writer Workshop Program. Her first book with DC, Eternity Girl, was released.
You don't have to read the whole thing. It's so long.
It is long.
Oh
mouth
my
is
God.
dry from all
You
the
don't,
accomplishments.
you don't have to
But,
read all my
I sent you my
accolades.
standard
It's
one.
all right.
Oh, that's awesome.
You
That was
don't
me
have
editing it
to.
down, but it's fine. Thank you for coming to our rescue there. And welcome. Thank you so much for being here, Max.
I'm
Really
happy to be
appreciate it.
here. Happy so much.
Happy so much.
Kim, one of our executives. Kim Roberto is the creative director lead of television at DC Entertainment. She works to create and implement DC's long-term content strategy across the media flywheel division.
Oh, they all have pronouns now.
Television, games, and
They didn't
interactive
all have pronouns at
experiences,
the beginning, but
consumer
then they
products,
noticed
and
that
editorial for domestic and international
that someone
markets.
did, and so they all
She's
updated their
developed several new
profiles.
television series, including The Penguin. I'm so hyped for that. Superman and Lois, Sweet Tooth, and more. Welcome, Kim.
Wasn't the
Thank
penguin
you
kind
so
of
much
like
for
a
having me.
dumpster fire?
Absolutely.
I heard.
David Tigarani is a queer, multiracial Latinx creative producer. His current credits as executive producer
Or am I
include
thinking of
Peacock's
something else?
upcoming Dead Day by Kevin Williamson and Julie Plec, AMC Network's The Boulet Brothers' Dragula, Resurrection, and Netflix's Bonding. Currently, David serves as the EVP, development and production of for Aftershock Comics, with over 18 film and TV projects in development. In addition to his producing career, David is a proud board member of Outcast.
Yeah, the penguin was a
crisis
horror
counselor
dumpster
for
fire.
suicidal or at-risk youth.
Great.
Welcome, David.
Thank you so much. Stoked to be here.
Yeah, man. Stoked to have you here. Okay, let's get into our discussion. And for this first question, I would love to hear from all of you on this, if possible. What are some of the challenges of translating an idea from comic book to screen in general? And anyone can jump in, please.
I mean, I think right off the bat, for me, the first thing is that comics usually are centered around characters who have internal monologues. So one of the biggest challenges is getting internal thoughts and feelings to be externalized in a way that's really exciting dramatically. And I think a lot of what's exciting about comics is you do have the words, you also have the pictures, and then it's like, how do you translate that into the movies, into the TV shows? So I think it's all about externalizing a lot of those internal thoughts and emotions.
Okay, thank you, Kim. James, I know you've had some stuff in development before and even currently.
Wafa doesn't have her pronouns
for you when
Watch, she's gonna fix it. She's gonna fix having her pronouns.
But I mean, it's been a really enlightening process over the last few years. I've had a bunch of projects in development.
But maybe
but
not
this
because she has
year
a
is the first
headscarf. So
time
it probably. Oh
that
no,
I've
she's gone. Never mind.
I've had the opportunity to dive in and like adapt some of my own work. And right now I'm working on one of my own projects. And it's an incredibly enlightening experience. It's writing a comic script is very similar in some ways to writing a teleplay or a screenplay, but the pacing is very different. I've spent the last decade of my professional life thinking about page turns. Basically, every 2 pages of a comic, you want to figure out, especially when you're writing horror, which is my main, that's my bread and butter. I am often thinking about how every 2-page unit and every page turn over the course of a 24-page issue, and how to build and sustain tension up to every page turn moment, because that's the only moment you can really surprise a reader. Once you turn the page, you are arrested by an image, and then you soak it all in, and then you start reading. And so that those tools I've had to relearn. But as someone who writes a bunch of dialogue heavy comics, it's also one of those things where I have to watch myself, because now it's like an open canvas where it's just like, oh, these people can talk forever. I don't have to worry about this being boring for 3 pages of just characters sitting in a room having a conversation. But at the same time, I do need to be worried about making everything, visually dynamic and all that. So it's been interesting seeing what translates and what doesn't, and also just in doing and straddling the line from directly adapting my own work and really coming at it from the ground up, and trying to capture the beating heart of it.
You were in a position where you had to learn a new craft. I don't know how often you've written screenplays in the past, but you've had to become better at it, at least, to try to make sure this is the best adaptation possible. Are there any particular resources you use to dig into the craft of screenwriting? Were there people you talked to make sure that you would be able to hone your craft here?
I mean, I talked to a bunch of friends who had dabbled in both, both sides of the spectrum, and I wanted to, and then on top of that, I just read a lot. Like, this was the, I got my hands on a bunch of screenplays, and was like bugging some of my writer friends where it's just like, hey, can you send me this that you wrote on, like, just getting my hands on anything that that works, because I mean, that's how I learned how to write comic books. The comics don't have any standardized scripting format. Everyone writes a comic script differently, so you learn to pick and choose whatever works for you. And aside from hopping into final draft and making sure that it's like, it is like kind of industry standard, I like, it's what I've been taking my leads from, what I liked and what I've read.
Thank you for sharing that. Thomas, I know you were in a really particular position. You were coming into an adaptation of something, and then on top of that, you had to add a new twist to something when it came to the Umbrella Academy. Would you care to talk about how the adaptation process worked for you?
Well, I mean, the Umbrella Academy as a show was already established in terms of like the language and thinking about the difference between the comics and the show. And when I came onto the project, it was already, season 3 had already been written. So basically the first 3 adaptations.
This was only a couple months ago, so this is relatively new.
4, which was a different project altogether because it wasn't actually an adaptation of any particular comic book. So I can't speak so much to that except to say that it was really the adaptation piece. It was really cool to see the ways that Gerard Way and Gabrielle Ba had this incredible dynamic with Steve Blackman in the room, and it really felt like there was a true give and take, so just in terms of like witnessing the ways that both sort of sides of that creative equation really seemed to be understanding their sides of the fence and finding ways to collaborate was really interesting to me to just witness. But in terms of like my piece of it, like when I came on, it was Elliot Page had announced that he was trans. This was something that happened, organically for him in a sort of moment between production schedules and cycles. And so the timing just worked out that the scripts were locked, and it was like 10 days before going into production on season 3. So when I got the call to like, can you come on and help us sort of figure out how to tell a story about this character, because Steve really wanted to make sure that Elliot's experience was reflected in the character.
Why?
And it was such a big question, I think, for the show's
Why?
fans and Elliot's fans of like how
that to me is like just such a fundamentally selfish thing, to be honest. Now, listen, man, I don't care if Elliot Page is trans. That makes no difference to me at all. But Elliot Page is an actor. Why is something that is going on in the private life of an actor dictating the storyline? That to me makes no sense. It's like, it's such pandering. It doesn't even like a story should be about the story. And if you need to recast the actor to tell the story, you recast the actor to tell the story. The real lives of the people in the story should not be dictating the storyline. The focus should be on telling a good and compelling story. I don't understand this at all.
were we even going to do this? And then we had this kind of incredible series of creative constraints between the scripts being locked. So, and the stories are all intersecting, and it's like 8 characters who all have like very specific roles and so on. And on top of that, the season 3 was a direct pickup from season 2. So it wasn't like the story could have been, this character was, had some sort of transformative experience and came back. So we had like a lot of real estate issues and a lot of creative constraints, but I actually feel like what ended up happening was kind of magical for that reason. And so because of all of that, really the story of Victor truly had to be a sort of textural story that sort of slid right into the broader character arc that the character already had and slid into the dynamics that already existed. And to me, that ended up feeling a lot more organic and honest in terms of trans experience. Like most of us it's not our defining character trait to be trans. And it's not the thing that that is the engine of our life stories necessarily.
If it's not your defining character trait, then why did you completely alter a pre-existing character to make them trans when they were not previously trans? You literally made it their defining character trait when you did that.
So I think, it was exciting to deal with those creative constraints with Steve, and then actually with Elliot himself. Because the only way I could think of to kind of figure out how to do this best was to just call him directly and say, when do you think this character figured out he was trans? You know better than anyone. And so he kind of pitched, in a way, the beginning of that story. So it was really,
again, why would the actor
really
know that?
and
Wouldn't the
organic,
comic
very
book writers know
unusual,
that?
To your point, but I think in some ways,
Did the people who
actually
created
so
the
much more
character have no
reflective of
input?
life, than what we typically see on screen.
Awesome. That sounds like a hell of a feat, man. And thank you for sharing all that, Thomas.
I wanted to say
Eleanor.
too, I
Oh,
really
sorry,
appreciated what Thomas and James were sharing, because I think it isn't a direct lift, right, from the page to the screen. And I think any adaptation, even James talking about like needing to write a comic for page turns and issue to issue monthly readers, I think we forget that a comic issue is ads maybe, and that's all you get to tell story month to month, and they do get collected obviously, but a part of that is it might only be, your 6-issue arc might only be a pilot. Sometimes it could be a season, sometimes it could be a feature, but I think
wait, I just had an idea. This is an awful idea. Hang on. Kino Review says, I feel like I need to get my mic set up and join you as a guest. You are more than welcome to. Let me know if you want to do that. I would have no problem with that at all. Boom says, okay, so this is a separate idea. This is just something that popped into my head. Boom says, once the company buys the rights, the original creator has zero say in what is done. That's definitely true, and I understand that. That doesn't mean that the actor portraying the character knows the character better than anyone. I would say the people who wrote the character know the character better than anyone. This is like an issue of like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Just because they can change the character and adapt it to based on personal decisions that the actor makes doesn't mean they should do that. It's not a good idea. It's not what's best for the story. But the idea I had, what if I could... This is awful. I can't believe I'm saying this live on the internet. This is going to get clipped and put on Twitter before I'm even done with this stream. What if after I wrote the Surviving Carrie Smith story, all the remaining chapters, what if I could get a Lifetime movie made about that? My Twitter stalking and harassment would make like the most perfect Lifetime movie. Oh God, this might need to be an actual life goal. Joshua would die if I got my story made into a Lifetime movie. That would be like Joshua's like pinnacle of success. He loves Lifetime movies. Oh my God. We need to figure out who should play me in my Lifetime movie.
The way I like to look at it is it does exist for us as a storyboard, and certainly, buyers love to talk about it that way. Like it helps them imagine what the show or film will be, but it's not our job to make it sort of exist in the other longer adaptation form as an exact storyboard. I think it's about the spirit of
based
it.
on a true story.
Sort of the organic question of what does the story tell you? What do the characters bring out when you get there? And then it becomes a collaborative process, because TV and film is more collaborative in some ways than the comic side, because you have so many more people working at it rather than your artist and your creator and your editors.
When you come to a point where you realize that it can't be a storyboard, that it has to indeed be something different, what are the challenges then? How do you make sure that it stays true to the spirit of what was already laid groundwork?
Actors these days are told not to read the comics.
As an entertaining TV show.
Why would they not read the comics with the characters that they're portraying? That makes no sense at all. Is that serious? I'll trust you. I have no reason not to.
Movie.
I think, we have the answer to that on some of our panelists right here. Is James and Roberto being involved in their own work is step one. And I think, as a producer, as someone that has worked at, Lionsgate and Turner, a lot of it is, people love to option up a book or an IP and throw away the creator and the author. And look, that's the reason all of us are in love with the thing in the first place. So why would you remove that person from the creative process? And I think having the creator, even the artist, involved in the process is so, important to the entire thing, regardless of who ends up adapting it or what director comes on board. So I think that's one of my first jobs, is making sure that a creator is involved in their own work and that they're a part of the process. And I think that then leads to spirited discussions about organic changes that need to happen, the adaptation process, even, sometimes like my creators or artists on the comic book side sharing with the showrunner like unpublished concept art, or even script documents that would happen, like James was saying, in the formatting of a comic script. Sometimes a creator is describing to their artist what they want and sort of a source image that they found on Google or whatever. And that kind of thing can help a director or
Oh, God.
showrunner, a filmmaker down the line actually.
Oh no, Barb. Barb is a troublemaker. Barb says, Dr. B, I'd wish you write Carrie as trans, and once she goes through the transition, she loses all her anger at you and stops harassing you and marries the Christian pastor. Maybe that's what'll happen in the Lifetime movie. We have to queer out my Lifetime movie.
Bring to life the vision of an artist and a writer in combination. I think that kind of thing is super important.
Carrie is trans
Thanks,
Christian.
David.
It's true.
I just want to echo that sentiment
Yeah.
really
It's
quickly.
true.
I think it's extremely important that the creators are involved in these projects. And one of the things that we've been doing over at DC within the last couple of years, as we've been, strategizing and building up our team, is really looking to these creators and bringing them into the process much earlier on. So, we can find out what was it that inspired them to write this.
Gloria, this is an interesting idea. Gloria says, I have a theory that people are taking over these IPs because they believe the fans are racist, etc. And they want to use the IPs to preach at the audience. Gloria, that is not out of the realm of possibility. How brilliant is that? It's kind of a good play if you think about it. They need to convert people everywhere they go.
In the first place, what thematically was it for you that drove these characters, etc. And so when we kind of have their insight, it helps us not only respect what their vision was, but also in thinking of it in terms of an adaptation. You don't want to necessarily just not plagiarize, but just tell the same story. You want to find a way of making it fresh or doing something with it that maybe you couldn't do on the page, but you can do on screen. So I think that for me is always really an exciting time when we can get, from the source what their thinking was.
As a writer, that is really nice to hear. So thank you for carrying on that attitude. Really appreciate it. Eleanor, I was going to ask you, you have this adaptation you're working on with Mags. What are some of the challenges of making sure that you have a new product that is a shining example of what the original work was, but is also something new and something tailor-made for the new format?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, just to kind of echo what everyone's been saying, I think getting to work with the creator is so important. I was the comic we're adapting is Kim and Kim. It's Mags's comic, and it's been and it's been my favorite comic.
Mags really creeps me out
for years, and like truly since I got staffed as a writer, like I've been talking about Kim and Kim and like every general I had, because I just wanted to find somehow to make it, and now we're happening, and I've been such a huge fan of Magdalene. I'm just gonna praise Magdalene the whole time.
Thank you.
And so I guess
she is stunning, and she is brave,
of,
and she is beautiful.
Staying true to her comics and bringing it into a new form, we've kind of, done it as like the first 4 issues, or expanding it actually into the season. And for me, it's what's really been important is the spirit of it. Kim and Kim is high energy, very funny.
What is Kim and Kim?
And episodic.
Can
in
someone
its
educate me,
nature.
please?
And I think there was just a certain level that, like, you know, Mags and I clicked on as far as our sensibilities. And I don't know. I'm sorry if this doesn't answer your question that directly, but I think the importance of, you know, it definitely hasn't been a lift for like frame by frame whatsoever. You know, it's taking like the story
I mean,
here.
how could it be? Those comics move so fast.
Yeah, they're so fast. They're in outer space. They're in different planets, and
And you only have 20 some odd pages.
yeah,
Phil's
yeah.
gonna
Like,
come
that's
on.
actually been
Excellent,
the thing
Phil.
that I've actually been the most like thrilled by from the creator side, is just like, oh, I can like really play with pacing. I can explore characters more deeply. The really fascinating experience has been working with another writer on these characters that have lived in my head at this point for like 7 years, and getting her perspective on them, and getting how have they lived in her head for 7 years, and the process of those versions of the characters, I guess, encountering is this much richer and fuller picture of these women than I ever could have done in the short mini stories that I was doing.
That's really
Mini series, not mini stories.
And as like a super, I mean, for me, it feels like a unique position because I was a genuine super fan of this comic, and so those characters have been in my head for 7 years, and so there was honestly nothing more delightful than, like, I love these two characters, Kim and Kim, more than anything in the world, and then to meet, like, you know, the one person who loves them more than me, and to combine our visions of them has been just a really beautiful process. It's been, yeah, what's up?
Yeah, and I just want to praise Eleanor just for a second for just being an incredibly insightful writer who understands these very deeply complex and flawed young women in this hugely global way that it really just blew me away.
There's still time to make this whole panel about you two just gushing on each other because it is extremely cute. I had to mute myself from how much I was squealing. That's really beautiful. Thank you two so much.
Yeah, we're adorable.
It's clear, absolutely. Roberto, if you have anything to add, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
No, I mean, just echoing a lot of that's been said. I mean, it's as everyone on this panel knows, it's so hard to get a group of people excited and passionate about anything, to get anything made. It was interesting. I was kind of thinking what people were saying. I've been an Archie super fan since I was a kid, and I was obsessed with these characters, and it took years to pitch and get people excited about Riverdale, and one of the challenges there was that everyone felt the Archie comics were too old-fashioned and too out of date. Many people thought that Archie comics were no longer published and only existed in the 50s. So in a weird way, it was great when it was like, oh wait, so you invented a gay character. And I'm like, no, Kevin's been in the comics. Kevin exists in the comic books, and that actually kind of helped people see, oh wait, maybe this doesn't exist in the 1950s. I mean, even that was like a big challenge. Everyone thought that the show was set in the 50s. Ironically, for our last season, we're going to be in the 1950s. But it was
Really?
Why? Kind of fighting against the expectations of that, and then changing the genre. You know, the Archie comics are basically comedic. Love triangle stories and things like that, and kind of shifting it to something, more, I'm not going to say, very genre and pulpy and things like that.
Time travel. God damn it.
Kevin Keller, I think, helped make Riverdale.
There was no time travel in Archie.
Like, oh, interesting. So it was exciting.
Awesome. Roberto, while I've got you, It's a bit of a good transition to one of my other questions. I'd love to talk about the process of taking a historically straight character like Cheryl on Riverdale, or a historically cis character like Vanya, and putting a queer spin on them. What do you think? This is for anyone who'd like to answer, but please, Roberto, I'd love to hear from you first. What do writers and executives need to know when they want to do something like this?
Gosh, that's a really good question. Well, it's funny. I think the first character that we made queer was actually in the pilot was Moose Mason. And it was funny because
Moose was not queer.
Came about for
I know
many
that
reasons.
much.
The biggest one was you can't introduce Kevin's and in the pilot in the last scene Kevin and Moose have snuck off from the dance and they stumble upon the dead body. And originally, when I first wrote the pilot, that was Kevin's boyfriend who he met at the dance. Devin Davis was his name. And as so often happens when we're working on these things, people said you can't afford another actor. So, and I was like, but Kevin has to be sneaking off into the woods with someone.
Wait, did they make Jughead queer?
I said,
seriously?
What about
Tell me that they didn't end up making Jughead queer in Archie. Because I haven't watched the more recent seasons. I only watched the first couple seasons, and last time I watched, Jughead was dating Betty, which was fine. Maybe not preferable, but fine. Okay, whatever. Did they make Jughead queer? God damn it! Why would they do that? Jughead was a perfect. I want to knit a Jughead hat with the crown. I have a pattern for it and everything. God damn it!
No, actually, it wasn't even me. It was one of the other producers said, "What if Moose is secretly gay and he and Kevin are hooking up?" And I was like, "I love this. Of course, I love this." But it was sort of like, wait a minute. Moose has been straight for 75 years.
Jughead and Betty had sex. Jughead is not an asexual. I mean, I guess asexuals technically can have sex. It's like they have all the functioning parts. But Jughead and Betty did not have, like, asexual awkward sex in the show. What the fuck?
So that was the first.
Do I have to go back and watch Riverdale now?
With Cheryl, it's interesting because she was brought on in the comics to sort of agitate and sex up the Archie comics. You know, Betty and Veronica had become both good girls. Veronica started bad as a bad girl, but then became a good girl. So she was sort of brought in to sort of stir things up. And we hadn't introduced.
Well, Jughead in the comics was, but he wasn't in the show. Oh,
and
guys, we have a special guest joining the channel for today to defend comic books. Welcome, Kino.
Thank you, Karlyn. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm glad you're able to join us. That's a nice background you got there.
I know. I appreciate it, right? And in the spirit of happy hour, since you have your craft beer, I am a rum man.
Excellent.
Sailor Jerry, so cheers.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers to you. Now, what have you thought of the first half hour of this panel? Do you have, like, let's catch us up.
Like, honestly, like, writers like this are the reason why the American comic book industry is dead or dying. For example, if you go to any modern bookstore, whether it be Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, to just give you an example, they have been overtaken, overpowered by manga, the Japanese comic book industry, to the point where they would, went from having like multiple rows of comics and graphic novels available for customers to buy to only having maybe like a section or a singular shelf. Is that bad? And spoiler alert, Thomas Page, he, him pronouns. Umbrella Academy is most likely going to be canceled after season 3, after they bastardizing one character. Just as an example.
Has there been a lot of backlash to that?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the actual gross sales comic books like Marvel and DC, for example, they are lucky if they're able to sell 30,000 units of books. Now, back in the day, like let's say 60s, 70s, 80s, and even the comic book boom of the 90s, if you sold under 300,000 books, your title was canceled and you're out of a job and you'll be blacklisted. These books are selling 30,000 units at best if they're lucky. Captain Marvel, just to give you an example, One Iota character, has been canceled and rebranded and relaunched over a half a dozen times so far. It's due to hackery, failed writing styles that are not attracting new customers or keeping the legacy customers.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me just go to this super chat from Nurutu. Nurutu, I'm not sure who you're talking about here. The guy needs to get over whatever stutter he seems to have. That may be. I'm just not sure who you're talking about, but I appreciate the support. So I want to talk about Captain Marvel for a second. So again, I don't know anything about comics, but I did at one point watch all of the Marvel movies in sequential order, not the order that they were released, in the in the actual sequence, so I could like follow it that way. Captain Marvel sucks as a movie. It sucks. It's really bad. I hated it. Like, is that weird? I felt like I was so weird when I hated that movie because I felt like I was like not in the mainstream on that.
No, no, you weren't weird for thinking that whatsoever. Like for those people that enjoy these titles, that enjoy these books, these characters and fandom as a whole, you're gonna be bombarded with a plethora of nerd Easter eggs. Which is great entertainment for that niche audience. However, my personal opinion, when Marvel was acquired by Disney back in 2011 or 2012, the quality of the writing and books and characters went down, and the proof is in the pudding within the Avenger films, is too. So you're not alone in this.
Excellent. I felt, I mean, there were things I liked about the movie. I liked the kind of 90s nostalgia. Like there were some cool things, but I was just like, this is like not a good movie. I had no idea. Do you have any thoughts on any of the characters that we see in this panel? Because I don't know who any of them are.
Honestly, I have not much background information on these writers as a whole, but I can tell you this. I know a few of them mentioned that they worked at CW. The majority of all the CW shows, whether it be Riverdale, Flash is on his last leg, Batwoman will be a great example. They're all going to be canceled here soon. The CW has been up for sale, for purchase for like a number of years now, and no one has thought to buy the network as a whole, and that comes with the agreement with Warner Brothers Discovery now. So CW is the plague right now.
Trump should buy the CW.
Oh God, no.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Kino. Listen, I'm just going to let it play. And if there's something you want to say, just feel free to interject and I will make sure to pause and we'll do the best we can to kind of make sure we're not talking over each other and stuff like that. Sound good?
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, guys, please mount that like button for me. Let's keep going.
Madeline, the actor, and I had a couple of conversations about it. And she said, I have this feeling that Cheryl's a lesbian. And I said, and we'd had similar conversations in the writer's room. And when we introduced Tony Topaz, who was a canonically bisexual character in season 2, everything sort of started coming together. But I have to say, everyone really, really embraced that. And there was much more pushback on Moose being gay than
Moose
than
was not gay,
which was interesting
in any way
and unexpected, and it felt like, ooh, if Moose is gay, is the world going to end? No, the world's fine. The world's fine. But yeah, that was part of that process.
Thank you, Roberto. And Thomas, it sounds like you had a pretty ideal situation with your showrunner who was.
So Naruto says CW was recently bought by Nexstar.
Okay, that must have just happened recently, but for a while, like the CW has been having trouble finding a buyer.
Yeah, and Vince says the CW has lost $2 for every $1 it's earned. It's a loser. That's too bad. I like the CW. Their shows are cheesy, but I enjoy them.
And the sad thing is too, the show Batwoman had a lot of potential when it first did its multi-universe crisis crossover with the Arrow, Supergirl, and the Flash. They're introducing like the Karen Kane character, who happens to be like a lesbian character. That's how she was originally written. problem with the show not succeeding. It was so in your face about it. I'm like, yo, we get it. And they butchered up the characters' origin stories too. But to make matters worse for that show on production wise, with stuff that is happening behind the scenes, the stuntman, the stunt coordinators, all the people doing all this dangerous work weren't fully qualified to do it. They were essentially diversity hires working on set just so the studio can have the check mark. And one of the stunt women is now paraplegic because of this as well too. So
Wow.
yeah, it's gotten really bad.
Jesus Christ.
Generally willing and able and excited to make sure that the story came to life. But if you had any advice to give to anyone, executives or writers, when it comes to making sure an adaptation like this goes smoothly, what would you say?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really credits to Steve Blackman because he really was, 100% clear about needing to do this. And it was really, it was about supporting, of course, Elliot's journey. But I think also, if you look back on Umbrella Academy, which people now have done, like you can't look back on that show and not, in terms of the adaptation, not think about Elliot as trans now and how was he playing his character up until this point. So I think earlier we were talking about the collaborative medium. Like my background is reporting and writing books before I came into this industry a few years ago. And the way in which storytelling happens collaboratively here is really exciting. And I think being open to that kind of collaboration is, part of the process. So in this particular case, obviously, again, it was organic in that sense. But I think in the broader, when you were asking this question, I was just thinking about, in my mind, there's sort of two things. One is,
hang on, we got a super chat from Nick. The last Batgirl movie was so bad they wouldn't even show it. That was shocking to me. How much money did they lose on that? Do you know?
I don't think they lost anything. It's just mainly a tax write-off, but estimates in that film is between $90 to $100 million or so.
That's crazy. My God.
There's a way that sometimes characters are gimmicks, right? And that's what we want to guard against. Like somebody gets an idea that it's sexy to have a queer character or a trans character. The Zoomers are all doing it, whatever. And then there's something really inauthentic about that and people can smell it because it's not real, it's not true, and it's not coming from a place of authenticity. I think that fundamentally involving queer and trans creators in stories in general surfaces queer and trans stories because we see ourselves everywhere. And we see characters that have been written maybe not with us in mind, but we find ourselves in those characters. And then that's what becomes exciting and subversive is how do we tell that story? So I think they're really, it's sort of an ephemeral thing to talk about authenticity. It's a buzzword and it's overused. But I think storytellers know how to tell stories and queer and trans people are really good at finding ourselves in stories. So I think the organic surfacing and bringing these sorts of writers and creatives into rooms and into these spaces is how those stories get told authentically. And there's not really a shortcut.
When there are instances, thank you so much, Lance. When there are instances in which we don't have a lot of queer people in the room, we are talking with, interacting with cis folks, hetero folks who have a lot of power. There's a question of what we do if we're trying to adapt things with queer characters and we're working with folks who don't have our experiences. There's the question of how we collaborate with them when they don't necessarily have a lens that they understand. I'd love anyone's thoughts on this about how to navigate those pretty murky waters sometimes.
I have a fun thought on this. I mean, for me, I think it's tough because you sometimes will feel like, just as an obstacle in and of itself, identity, like sometimes you're in the room and you're not sure if you're the only queer person there. You're not sure if you have any allies. But for me, one of the things that I always love to do is cite my sources and bring evidence. So I love data.
Hang on, we got another super chat from Naruto. Thank you for the super chat. CW is a distribution platform. It's not really meant to be a profitable network. The CW itself doesn't make any of the shows it airs. I mean, fair enough, but I still feel like they should be able to be successful with what they're doing. Like the shows don't suck a lot of the time. Or maybe I just haven't watched the CW in a couple of years. I don't know. Maybe it sucks now.
It's like the majority of the where networks like CW get their revenue from is from advertisement and ratings. When you have like under 100,000 like viewers watching your show on an off-on basis. That's not a sustainable platform. And it just goes back again to either faulty writing or inadequate acting, like to star and be a showrunner for these said properties. And when you're dealing with the CW, especially with the DC-based characters, you have an obligation and responsibility to be caretaker for these beloved characters, because just because you have a core built-in audience doesn't mean that they're going to be loyal to you if you don't do the show justice. You know, so unfortunately, it's hemorrhaging money. And yeah, it's like there's a number of different effects houses working on these shows. They, like the shows are fairly inexpensively made. Each show has like roughly a week turnaround. Everything's shot in camera, and you just copy paste your visual effects and call it a day. Yeah, so there's a ways around it. And yes, it is a distribution platform though. But those studios that CW is working with, they do have licensing rights to use those characters.
All right, thank you, Phil. Kino, sorry.
I love research. I mean, it all shows that diverse and inclusive content makes money. And I think to get a cishet person really invested, you sometimes have to go straight for the money and just show them that not only are these stories worth telling for obvious reasons that we are people and our lives and stories matter and are worth telling.
This person just said that cis heterosexual people are not interested in telling good stories if they have LGBTQ characters. They're like, that's such bullshit. Everyone is interested in a good story. Start telling good stories instead of just like bitching and complaining about equity all the time, and you might have a different result.
And I also want to point out too what Thomas, as well as Rick mentioned in there as well too. It's like, oh, if you're not this color, if you're not this sexual orientation, you don't have a right to write, a particular character. That's the most racist bullshit. Sorry, can I cuss on your stream?
You can cuss, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, that's such racist bullshit and hypocrisy I've ever heard from a creative in my entire life. Todd McFarlane, for example, creator of Spawn, he debuted this book back in 1992. He's a white guy from Canada, all right? So what kind of character did you think he created? He created a black guy who was a soldier that went to hell, came back to fight crime. And one of the jokes that he had is that he took off his mask, trying to heal his scars up. He turned himself white. And that was a joke.
Oh, no.
So these people have no rhyme or reason or excuse to tell anyone, you can't create that character because you're this color. You can't write this character because you're not a particular sexual orientation. These people are hacks at best.
All right.
But they're worth it in a financial sense. And I think that a lot of the times with these situations, you got to hit them in the pocketbook. You got to show them that it's a financially lucrative, smart endeavor.
Great.
That's such a great point, especially when, again, we're seeing toxic fandom sort of on the rise with Little Mermaid,
toxic
with Star Wars,
fandom,
with everything sort of coming.
Hang on. What does toxic fandom mean, Kino?
I hate this terminology. It's a way to baiting your audience to get cheap marketing on social media content. Like Henry Cavill, Superman, for example, he was asked about the toxic fandom in the Richard series before he left it recently. He's like, I hate that word. I hate describing the fan base as toxic fandoms. They're just passionate people. We're not toxic. We are passionate. We are heavily invested in these properties that these bastards are bastardizing, and we're going to call you out. Like the best example of fuckery that has ever occurred in cinematic history was when the first Sonic movie came out. The CGI visual effects was so horrible. The fans went to Twitter, social media, did digital comps, to give examples, say, hey, look, this is what you did. This is what we did. This is what you can do to make it better. The director, with no notes from the studio, I believe it's Paramount, with no notes from the studio executives, went out of his way and is like, you know what, you are right. We are sorry. We're gonna do justice by you. They extended the release time to go back in and fix what was fixed, and it was great. It was excellent fan service. So there's no such thing as a toxic fan. We're just passionate. they're getting their definitions mixed up at best.
I mean, it seems like they're saying, like, you know, you have these fan bases that that love these characters, that love these storylines, that have been reading these stories like all their lives, that are heavily invested in them. Then these people swoop in, take your favorite characters, make them something they're not, and then you guys who are going to the movie theater or whatever to watch a movie about your favorite characters are being served up something completely different than what you expected, and they're like, no, you're just toxic if you don't like what we did, when they ruined your story. Is that what's happening?
In a nutshell, yes. And also, now their favorite card to play these days is to do the infamous race and gender swap of an already established character as well. And it's part of a marketing tactic that's frankly it's not going in their favor. I'm like, for example, Andor is supposed to be one of the best Star Wars miniseries to come out on Disney Plus. No one's watching it. Why? Because your established legacy fans, what I mean by legacy established fans, that went to go see Star Wars back in '77 as a kid, are now watching the show with their children or their grandkids, got burned so many times by Disney and what Disney has done to that property. They're like, no more. We're not watching it. So this is affecting their bottom line, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen with the live action Little Mermaid movie, because that indeed was a race swap of a character that was written by a gentleman from Holland.
I remember seeing a video of a little black girl watching the preview or something for the Little Mermaid and going, why is she black? Ariel's white. It's like a little black girl. It's like, yeah, of course. Sin says, what bothers me as a writer is that they want authentic narratives. What they don't want is to tell a good story. And I agree that they're hacks. I mean, that's my biggest problem too. Like just tell a good story. Like, you don't I just don't understand like all of these people that are coming in and focusing on like the identity attributes of the character without focusing on who the character is, what they believe, how they feel, what they think, what their story arc is, what their journey is. And it's just like, it just feels so plastic, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's a great terminology for it, especially when you have movies being dictated by a committee and a corporation. Don't get me wrong, you go into the movie industry to sell a product to make money off of it, or to tell your story and art, which is perfectly fine. Now, I don't want to get anything twisted by saying, oh, a black actress can't play a white established character. That should never be the case. I'm a firm believer of, if you have the ability and you have the credentials to back up a performance, but by all means, this should not matter. And that's the point where a lot of people protesting the Disney movies, like it shouldn't matter, but Disney's making it matter when there's no need for it to matter. And to give you another example, J.J. Abrams, from Bad Reboot, wants to make a Black Superman movie. There's no need for a Black Superman movie. If you want to take an established character, if you want to take an established character and play within the Superman universe that happens to be African American and male, great. There's already a character that exists. His name is called Steel. They made a movie of it back in '97 with Shaquille O'Neal. It was shit. Not all basketball players make great actors, okay, mind you, but that character already exists within that universe. How about you promote established characters instead of bastardizing what everyone else is established with?
Oh, God. Naruto says the woke left in entertainment is becoming the 90s Christian movies that beat everyone over the head with a message, like Left Behind in the 90s.
Trying to remember that one.
It was with Kirk Cameron, where everyone was.
Oh, the Rapture movie.
Yeah, the Rapture movie.
Oh yeah, I didn't see that one simply because of Kirk Cameron.
It was dumb. It was bad.
Anything after Growing Pains with him in it, not interested. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was uber Christian. No offense to Christians. This is not a commentary on Christians. This is a commentary on bad movies. Okay.
We're all doing and we're trying to put out in the world is as queer people or people of color that are telling stories about our experiences, those stories will matter to someone. That representation will matter. I keep thinking about the TikToks of the young Black girls that are watching, you know, Haley be Little Mermaid, and that's a huge deal for them, and that'll matter even with the trolls sort of bombing everything. And so the more we can put our stories out there, and the more we can even center queer or trans narratives as the main focus point of our stories, instead of just, you know, a side character or a piece of a larger cishet narrative, I think that is important, even if sometimes they're not going to sell or they're not going to sort of be marketed the same way. I think just putting them out in the world is going to be meaningful in small ways that we might not even understand.
Thank you, David. Cool. If no one else has anything else to say about that particular question, we can move on. But also, if you come up with something you want to say and you want to jump back to it, that's totally fine. Yeah, so when bringing queer characters to TV or film, what do you all wish we saw a little bit more of? What still needs work when it comes to adapting these types of characters to the screen?
I'll jump in.
And, all right, cool.
I think you got to go with the behind the scenes. I think it's been echoed through several voices already, but I think we've seen a pretty amazing uptick in media where we're seeing our stories being told. But kind of like what you were saying, Thomas, it's important that behind the scenes we have advocates and people that are championing these stories, but also championing fresh voices and giving people with marginalized voices a platform so that they can be heard. And sometimes it's just as simple as, like, if you're an ally, just kind of making that space and sort of stepping aside and just letting someone have the room and speak. When it comes to, like, whenever I'm interacting with people, I also always try, just as an executive on the, you know, business side of things, I try myself to create a safe environment just by kind of establishing, like, hey, this is a safe space. I'm a member of the queer community. Like, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. But I think it's important that there's more people like that behind the scenes at the C-suite level, like in really higher up leadership positions. Because it's one thing to have, you know, a group of, you know, worker bees, which you very much need, but it's another when you can have, you know, the leader of a company making those types of decisions. Like one of the people that I love working with and who I admire most is Greg Berlanti. He's like queer icon who has his own production company, and, you know, he gets to establish that platform, and we've loved working with those guys and creating stories through that lens. So it takes sometimes, I think, just a powerful voice in the room.
That shouldn't really
and just
matter.
to underline that, and I guess what I said earlier, like, I think that the potential of queer and trans storytelling is kaleidoscopic. I mean, we have so barely scratched the surface. And, you know, Gen Z, I think the latest survey is like 15% of them identify as LGBTQ+. So, you know, to the earlier point Kim made about there's profitability here, not that I think that's why anything should happen, but it's certainly, you know, there's a real argument that Hollywood is behind the curve, actually, in terms of storytelling when it comes to younger people and how they see themselves reflected. And I think trans stories in particular suffer from a really harrowing experience of having been sort of created by culture. I mean, Disclosure does a great job, that documentary, of sort of outlining how that's happened. This feedback loop of us seeing ourselves reflected horribly, and then, you know, and then that affects us, and then so on, it goes on, and then that means that the sort of well that you can go to as a cis creator when you're thinking about a trans character is pretty limited and pretty frankly fucked up. And so what we need is to continue to expand, you know, the actual like vocabulary of who people are and what's possible. And I think trans people in particular suffer from, you know, the effects of this kind of dehumanizing visibility that's not really visibility at all. And we're just now changing that. So again, same thought I had earlier, but just to keep underlining it, like, the truth is we just need to be in the room because there's so many of us and there's so many intersecting identities, which I would love to see more of. Like, I'd love to see more trans people of color, disabled trans people of color, you know, trans people who are queer identified, trans people who are not. I mean, there's so many stories that have not been told. And that's because people can't tell them because they haven't lived them. And because we've trained our whole culture to other trans people through our storytelling. So this is a ongoing project that we're just all at the beginning of. And I'm really excited, hopefully, to see this change keep happening, but it's really the beginning of where we need to go.
Super inspiring answer. Sorry, go ahead, David.
I just wanted to add really quick onto
Karlyn, real
Thomas's,
quick.
Yep.
About trans
Hang on.
storytelling.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to be
That's
cutting
okay.
in and everything.
That's
I'm like,
all right.
clearly these people have never seen the movie The Birdcage.
Obviously not. They like to ignore everything that doesn't fit their narrative.
Like anything that came out before 2016, these people's eyes like never existed. I'm like, you don't have to be like a part of the LGBTQ plus community to play that said character. You don't have to be straight to play exclusively a straight character. I'm like, you are paid pretenders. You're supposed to act. Well, sorry, I hit my microphone. You're supposed to act. You're supposed to be able to have fun. You're supposed to be able to explore new ideas, and express emotion as well too. That's what actors are. That's what they do. And the fact that it's like we can only hire this person for this role, it's ludicrous. It baffles me.
Boom also points out, like, Jennifer Lawrence is the first female superhero. No, she was not the first female superhero. Even I knew that.
Yeah, I didn't see much of that story other than what.
Well, it's like they're like ignoring like Sigourney Weaver.
Sigourney Weaver, like, oh my god, like her name is escaping me. The chick that played Sarah Connor in the Terminator series.
Oh,
Linda,
yeah.
Like Linda Hamilton, you know, the 1st Wonder Woman of the 70s, the cultural icon, like of an entire generation. The gall and nerve that little girl, you know, even say such a thing. I'm like, wow.
Well, it just shows, doesn't it? And Boom, I knew that was sarcasm. Boom, I knew that was sarcasm. I think we all knew that. But like the thing of it is, it's like there's no awareness of things that came before them. There's no cultural awareness. Like if I was cast as an actor in something, I would go back and look at other people who've played like powerful female leads. I would make a point to like say, what can I learn from them? What is there anything that I can learn to bring into this new character? I mean, maybe there is, maybe there isn't, but I would absolutely try to have a much bigger cultural awareness than I feel like a lot of these people have. And it's the same thing with the woke stuff in schools. It's like they pretend that nothing before, you know, the year 2000 actually happened. And it's like, no, there's a whole history here that you're just ignoring.
Yeah, on top of that too, I always get the Waters mixed up. Is it John Waters or Roger Waters? John Waters was the director, right?
Yes, of Hairspray.
Hairspray,
Crybaby,
Pink Flamingos, Crybaby, all those classics.
Those are good movies.
We
need to watch John Waters movies for movie night.
Exactly. I'm like, his earlier underground stuff was overtly, you know, like LGBT, you know, plus centric though, but it was fun back in the day where it was illegal to be gay back in the 60s and 70s. Now he kind of, you know, like most recent interview, he says like, wow, I kind of wish that it wasn't so, you know, out there back in the day. It was so much more fun. Now it's just like passe. It's like whatever. I'm like, the exceptionalism of creativity and expression is lost, and all these people know how to do is just push identity. And I'm like, no, you're losing the point. Going back to their stories, it's like, oh, we need more stories to reflect this person. We need more stories to reflect that person. I'm like, look, a coming to age film can resonate with any audience, regardless of race, creed, or other. Period. All right. Finding acceptance in this world, whether it be through family, society, peers, workplace, what have you, anyone on any level of intelligence can find a way to relate to that. Like, I'll bring in Lord of the Rings. I identified more with Gandalf than I did with Frodo or Sam. He's a fictional old character with a bushy beard. I'm working on my beard, and I'm not that old. But how do I see myself into? How do I see myself in the Gandalf-esque character? His mannerism.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's keep going.
We need to be in the room, and we need to be listened to. And I worked for, side note, I worked for Roberto on a couple of shows, and like I felt that was like a prime example of feeling very listened to in the room. And with a perspective of like realizing that it's like you're not gonna know the story. That's why we're there to talk about these characters. I mean, it's not the only reason we're there, but when it comes to those characters, like we have a version of that story, and it might be the complete opposite of what you were thinking that story is. As far as trans storytelling, like moving beyond the fact that they're trans, expanding our minds in our adaptations that any of these people could be trans. Any of these people could be cast as a trans actor. Any of these people could be written as trans, because I think a lot of times I talk with cis writers who and understandably get a little worried about doing something wrong, or even if it's just like someone writing a pilot and it's just like, well, if I make this character trans, I'm gonna have to do all this stuff or whatever. And echoing what Kim had said, I try to, especially in pitches and in meetings and stuff, I always try to set that like, this is a safe space. You're not going to say anything wrong.
A safe
if
space.
You do, I'll start crying. It'll be really bad. No, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. And I feel like that freedom is really important in the discussions around our characters, but yeah, moving beyond the fact that they're trans, I also, a huge thing, would love to see more than one trans person in a scene together. We
Tell
have
me about it.
Is there like a Bechdel test version of this?
There needs to be.
It's basic, yeah. It's basically, does a trans person have friends who are also trans? And
Well, because I think the real question is, I know surprisingly few cis people at this point.
in real life, yeah.
I want to live in your world, Mags. That's the world I want to live in.
No, you don't. No, you don't.
They want to live in a world with all trans people. This is what we're talking about with Socialism Saturday, where they want to get rid of all gender, and they want to totally eliminate the gender binary. They're literally saying this. They only want to be in a world with trans people. Because cis people don't have any good stories to tell. All the comics need to be, yeah, exactly. Phil, we need to pour another drink. I just finished my beer. I'm getting the birthday cake malt beverage.
These people just admitted that outside thought is illegal, and we want to live in an echo chamber.
All cis thought is bigoted and toxic. Oh, this one's pretty too. But we always have alcohol. All right, guys, mount that like button if you have not already. I feel like Phil is adding a lot to this. Kino is adding a lot to the stream. Sorry, Kino. Guys, let's keep going.
Yes, I do.
It's happy hour. Come on.
No, you don't.
It is
It's
happy
a miserable
hour.
little
Cheers.
bubble. But I actually just want to sort of build on this. Something that I have been so increasingly frustrated by in the especially trans media is we're still in the stories kind of have to be inspirational kind of phase where it all has to be like, look, they're just like you. They're normal. They're just normal teenage girls or normal. And I've written some of that stuff because sometimes that's true, but there's so many other ways to be trans. And part of what's been so exciting about adapting Kim and Kim is I've never seen a TV show that gives a trans woman a character like Kim Quattro, because she's just this absolute garbage fire disaster tornado who does not have an inspirational story and is not trying to reconcile with anybody and doesn't. Of course, she has trauma. Everybody has trauma, but it's getting beyond the usual tropes.
Glad to hear that.
See, this is the
David, were you going to say?
Oh, go ahead.
This is the problem. We always discuss, like in private on your Monday and Wednesday Zoom calls with your locals community about life experience, for writers. these people don't know life experience other than their own personal experience, which is perfectly fine. You can always reflect yourself in your characters. That is perfectly fine. However, again, I'm going to refer back to the movie The Birdcage. What is that movie rooted in? In the most simplistic form. A young couple is going to get married. They're meeting each other's families for the first time, and one person's is in a blended family of some kind. That story can be adapted to cater to straight LGBTQ, the LGBT mafia plus community, if you will, African American, Latino, Hispanic, Asian Americans. It has a plethora of reach demographic it can cater to, but they're only solely fixated on one thing. They're not talking about broader issues. So
I agree. It's like it's like it all goes back to the same thing, which is that they have missed the fundamental concept of telling a good fucking story and using the archetypes that already exist and the models that already exist. And then it's almost like, and it's so sad and pathetic too, because it's like, it's plug and play. Like you just said, The Birdcage is about a young couple meeting families for the first time. Chaos ensues, right? You can plug and play any number of characters in those roles and tell an infinite amount of stories. But it's like the character, like the structure is the same.
Yeah, exactly. The story be sort of the same. The structure is the same. All you're doing, like you said, is plug and play and copy and pasting over. You don't have to change much at all, as long as you stay true to the core mythology, to the core story plot structure. It's interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
And these people
they don't get it.
Say something earlier?
I think Mags said it better than I ever could have, but essentially, like on the Outfest side, as the largest LGBTQIA film festival, one of the programmers the other day was talking to us about the cycle of trans and queer narratives and how first they need to be tragic. So again, we can have empathy with the larger public, and we have our HIV stories and all these things that have already happened. And then they turn into comedy and sort of that best friend character, or what have you, and their supporting character, the main character. And then we go into the normalization that Mags was talking about. And I think what we need to see is in that period, we get so many coming out stories. I think every coming out story, right, has probably been told, or we've seen different angles on it. What we need is actually fully realized, lived in trans and queer characters, that their sexuality, that their gender identity is not their only character trait, but that they have a dimensional realized life, and they live in a life in which they have family members and friends and lovers, and they're messy and they're tragic and they're weird. And I think we need to see that in space. We need to see that in the Wild West. We need to see that in our time. Like, I think we just need more of celebrating queerness and transness in a way that has not been done, because we've been relegated to like needing to speak on the parts that make it relatable to other people. And at this point, we don't need to be relatable anymore. We can just exist.
Yeah, no.
I wish that was true.
You're here.
What were we going to say, James?
Just jumping on that, I really feel like the biggest thing that I would like to see more of are queer leads of stories that aren't queer stories. Like just literally just put a queer person in the center position of the sorts of stories that
they did that.
Like,
go ahead. What do you want to say?
They already fucking did that. Ian McKellen, like he's Magneto in X-Men. He was Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. He was Sherlock Holmes a number of times as well too. Non-queer roles, and his name was like top tiered on the marquee. This guy's full of shit, like flat out. They have been doing that for years. I'm done. I'm sorry.
All right, it's okay.
Are being told that do very, very well, and it's just like it opens these genres up. There's new angles to come at it with, and I mean, like that's at the heart of so many of the comics that I work on. It's just like me going step by step through the sorts of comics that I loved when I was like 16 to 25 and just being like, okay, I'm going to take everything I loved about that and I'm going to put myself at the center of it. But I am like but that isn't the point. Like the point is I still want to tell the scariest story possible. I still want to do my Stephen King novel. Like that's the sort of like that's so much of my personal goal and what I also want to just see out in the world. And like to that end, the other thing that just very selfishly I want to see more of is queer villains, which I know we stayed away from for a while because it was, like it got a little, there's some problematic sides of it, but I love a good queer villain. And it's just like those were my favorite characters growing up. And it's because they were the only queer coded characters, but I still love them. And I desperately love a queer villain. And I think that it requires more queer characters in the mix in general. If the only character that's queer is the villain, that's a problem. But
why is that a problem? So you can't have a queer villain if you don't have any other queer characters? That doesn't make any sense. Like queer people can't be bad too?
Oh no, they just pretty much said the quiet part out loud. Like you heard about the Tim Burton show on Netflix Wednesday?
I heard about it, yeah.
Yeah. They made the black girl the bully. Now you're calling Tim Burton a racist for doing that now.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
You can't make this up.
They're saying basically only straight white men can be bad people, essentially.
Yes.
God damn it. Why does everyone suck except for us? My God. Hang on, we got a super chat coming in from George. There it is. The problem is they can't write a queer character beyond that. The guy is complaining about it, but can't see it's their fault for not writing them fully fledged. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's like, this is the problem with like the Elliot Page thing in Umbrella Academy. It's like you literally made being trans the central focal point of that character when you took the actor's personal life and infused it into the story.
If anything, if they really cared about respecting the lore so much, that we're only talking about one character, like that has a group of people, like I think about like maybe 12 main headliners in there, and you got one that went through like a life change recently. You can always recast that character. There's no need to butcher the established lore. And George was absolutely right, by the way. So shout out to him on that one. I forgot who mentioned it earlier, so forgive me. I was trying to shuffle get myself situated earlier. It was about someone mentioned that okay, the original creator signed off on this. They no longer had the rights to the show, so the studio has free reign within limits, as long as they don't do complete lore violations, or it won't be a problem. But the fact that this is, it's kind of like a gray area, but it just depends on the contracts that the creators agree to with Netflix or the production company.
All right.
Something I just want to see more of in the world.
Thank you for sharing that, James.
Oh, yeah.
How about you, Roberto? You're in a unique position because you're in a position of power in your room. So I wonder if you felt any freer to just see some of your fantasies come to life on screen, or you've still hit some of the same obstacles the rest of us do.
Yeah, I mean, just kind of picking up on something that James said is, I love so many of the narratives are coming out or tragic or things like that. I love genre pieces that have queer characters at the center, and in horror stories, like so many of your amazing comics, James. It is funny. We have this conversation all the time. What can we do? I remember when Eleanor and I were working on a story of Sabrina. There was one episode that was sort of an anthology. Every character was sort of trapped in a horror story, and we had a character who was transitioning. Susie was becoming Theo, and their horror story was sort of inspired by kind of Pinocchio. Theo started to turn to rub the lotion on their arm and started to turn into a tree. And we talked a lot about, should we do this? Is it, and then I think, Eleanor, you said, well, Theo's part of the cast. Theo's one of the kids. Everyone else is going through a nightmare scenario. Why should Theo not go through a nightmare scenario? And it was kind of the most chilling of the stories. So we have that conversation all the time. I mean, it's funny. There's a novel that I'm working on, an adaptation where the hero is queer and the villain is queer, and it's exactly as you said, James. It's like great that there's not just the one villain. Then it's sort of like, but it's great that they're both, and you kind of don't know which is the villain, and it's sort of like a kind of a psychological, sexy kind of Fincher-like thriller, but it's really great to have both a hero and a villain. But this is the conversation we have almost in the room, kind of nonstop, about our queer characters, is sort of protecting them, but not too much. You know, and stuff like that. But similar conversations that we have about all of our, you know, least represented characters or more marginalized characters, kind of very protect them, but then also want to make sure that they're doing the fun stuff that everyone else is doing as well.
Thank you, Roberto. Yeah, so I was in a position, just briefly, just back to David's point about queer people just existing without necessarily having coming out stories to back them up. I was in a position in my last room where one of the EPs was saying, I'm done with coming out stories. I just want people to exist, and that is it. You will know that Isaac, one of our characters, is trans. He's a trans bodyguard. And everything that was interesting about Isaac had to do with him being a mess. He didn't know how to manage his love life. He didn't know how to balance his life on the personal side with his professional one. He's bullheaded. He's brilliant. He's strong. There's so many other ways to make him interesting, on top of what's nominally interesting about him being queer or trans. And that liberated us a lot. There were times when our room would go back to like almost being tempted to be like, oh yeah, but like be cool if his coming out story, and our EP was like, I said, and we were able to push forward and evolve that character in a way that was much more interesting than we ever could have handled before. So kudos to those of you in this room who brought up that issue. It is super, super important. I have one more thing before we get into our next questions. For those of you who are attending, we only have a few minutes left before we get to our Q&A.
Oh, the Q&As
so
are the
if you
best
would
part.
like to submit questions, now is the time.
Yes,
I'm gonna
submit
keep
questions.
asking our panelists questions, but yours count too. So we'll love to see those in the Q&A box.
Let me ask you this, Karlyn.
I need to go ahead
Oh
and
yeah,
sign off.
Mags.
Because it's
No!
like 11 p.m. Here.
Mags, thank you
Very
so
tired.
much. For
Oh,
being
I'm so upset that Mags won't be there for the Q&A. Were you trying to say something, Kino?
Yeah, it's like, have you ever noticed that like all these stories that they claim that they want to tell, and yet they're telling all happen to be repetitive in one way or another?
Yeah, it's all the same thing. It's so boring. It's so boring and derivative.
Yeah, it's like there's nothing wrong with a good coming out story or acceptance story. It's just, I don't know if it's just laziness on their part, or maybe they all had this similar life experience though. But it's just, that's another thing. It's like, I can't speak to the entirety of a straight, cis audience on a commercial sense though. But like, if it's a good story, people are going to watch it. It's going to win awards. But if it's rubbing your audience the wrong way while catering to forget the expression, a niche audience, it's not going to succeed. It's not going to be long lasting. And people are just like, okay, what network or what streaming service is this on? Okay, I'm not going to give my money to the streaming service anymore because I feel alienated. I feel like I'm being bashed over the head repeatedly. Why should I continue giving my money to a company that hates me?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like there were so many coming out stories in like the 90s. So many coming. I mean, in the 80s and the 90s, it's like it's been done. This is not like a new thing. And again, I agree with you. I'm not like necessarily opposed to it. But why can't we? If I were to tell stories about like this type of audience, I would totally move beyond any of the stuff that's done before, and I would try to look at it from a new angle. Maybe that's just me. Nick says these are sexually suppressed people. I think that might be very true, Nick. Very true. And Naruto says Roberto is the one with the stutter. All right, I agree with you there. The guy that's ruining Riverdale.
Oh, good. For a second, I thought I was talking about me because
Yeah.
I am a bit nervous.
No. You're doing just fine. No, that wasn't. He sent that in before you joined, so you're fine, and you're doing just great. Just great, Kino.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One
Yeah.
thing that who was it, Roberto, or no, it was David that mentioned this. He had a good point of wanting to see more LGBTQ representation in film and cinema, which is fine. But the one genre that made me laugh and chuckle, he said Western. I immediately got Blazing Saddles vibes. I would love to see them try to do a remake of Blazing Saddles with LGBT centric characters with a cisgender.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. Like if you want to reboot a movie that can never be redone properly and without being canceled, do that. I would love to see. I would love to see that.
You know who should actually do that though is like an unwoke filmmaker should totally do that. That'd be fantastic. It would be hilarious.
Yeah, I hate to say a lot of unwoke filmmakers are still in the closet because if they come out and say, "Hey, this is bullshit," they're going to get canceled. They will no longer have a job in the industry.
Well, I know, but they should pretend. They should be like, I want to make this totally LGBTQ version of Blazing Saddles, but then like play it totally straight, but like change the sexuality of the characters. That'd be great.
I think what made that movie work so extremely well is that you had the writing of Mel Brooks as well as Richard Pryor. They were opposite of each other, meaning Mel Brooks wrote all the jokes for the sheriff, and Pryor wrote all the jokes for Gene Wilder. So if you want to put a healthy twist on it with diversity of thought, not of just skin color or sexuality, do that. Mm-hmm. Like, let's see what happens. Shake it up, blend it up a bit, and it'll be amazed what comes out at the end of it.
Being here, really appreciate you coming, especially at this late hour.
You are stunning and brave, Mags. Thank you so much. Stunning and brave.
Take care.
Stunning and brave.
Bye. Awesome. Yeah, Eleanor, you two are adorable, as has been previously established. I am curious though, like the synergy you two have wasn't because you already knew each other previously, and I would love to know in general, like how this group, or perhaps you, would advise anyone who is a fan of existing comic book work, loves an IP, isn't necessarily connected to the author from the beginning, and just has to make their case for adapting a story. What was your story? How did you get things to work out this way?
Well, I mean, I think with Mags and I mean, I was a genuine like super fan. I have like all of her comics. And I told this when we pitched it, you know, it was like a comic I found pretty early in my transition, the first year or two, and it was something that gave me, it was queer storytelling that wasn't like, the character was trans, but you didn't, like, one of the characters was trans, but you didn't find out until the second issue, and it wasn't a big reveal, oh my gosh, she's trans or whatever. It was like she's getting trashed with her best friend on top of a spaceship van and like needs to bitch about her dad, and it happens to be about her transition, and it's just so beautifully brought into it that I don't know, it really inspired me, that it's like and also I identified with this like fuck up trans woman who's mad at everybody and wants to run away in space, and I think that was really what it was that I identified with that character so much, and I think in turn ended up identifying with Mags so much. But I mean, I don't know, I guess like the advice for it, was just like I like finding the genuine like feeling of like what makes you so excited about the story, and that's what it did for me. It made me feel I really needed to hear a story at the time that was like queer people get to have like huge adventures in space and get to be fuck ups and then get to do awesome stuff, and like it still kind of works out, and just get to be fully realized people, because I think for a lot of queer and trans people, I feel like there's a lot of pressure, you know, to be, you know, this or that, or like match this narrative or whatever, and that just felt so different. But then I think the advice is just to be genuine. I was a genuine like super fan, and I definitely had people look at me in meetings when I was telling them about this comic, like, okay, all right. And I, found there was like, it was like a several years into the, I was actually your guest at the next meeting, Will Graham. They were at general with them. They were looking for something that was like, we're looking for really like queer sci-fi in space, like female-led comedy. And I just like exploded and like told them about this thing. And like, I think it was my excitement that like made them want to go read it. And so, yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Was she talking Star Trek Discovery?
I'm not sure. Was she talking about like this thing that she's developing with that other trans person that just left?
I honestly don't know. Like, if she's talking about like lesbians and trans in space, she practically just described Star Trek Discovery.
Did that have a lot of like LGBTQ people?
Yo, that's all they beat the audience over the head with.
Really? I'm gonna have to ask Victor about this because I never watched Star Trek. I've like never been into it at all. But Victor has done like marathons of it. Oh, she's talking about Kim and Kim.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with that one. My apologies. Like the way that she was describing it sounded like Star Trek Discovery.
The Final Frontier, queer people in space. Boom says they're talking about Vagrant Queen, which is a sci-fi failure Mags V wrote. You know anything about that one?
I'm a straight white guy, Karlyn. I can't help you out with that one. I apologize.
That's all right.
James from the other end of the
go ahead.
But that shouldn't be my excuse for not consuming certain content, though. But unfortunately, no, I'm not familiar with it. I do have the chat window open up on another screen.
You can see the chat if you go into the comments in StreamYard. So that'll show you the live chat, which is different than the private chat. But but it's kind of like what kind of sucks though is that people might be dissuaded from watching things that are about LGBT characters because they're like, oh, here we go. I'm gonna get hit over the head with it. I just want to watch a good story, and it's like it's so sad. I mean, I found myself doing that with movies, and I actually used to really like gay movies, for the lack of a better term. Like before it was like this like mainstream woke thing, I used to watch like movies about like gay couples all the time because it was like like there weren't that many of them. It was a little taboo. I liked watching how they approached the story. And then as soon as like everything went woke, I was like, why do I even want to watch this anymore? It's not going to be good. It's not going to have a good storyline. Like, what's the point?
Yeah, exactly. It's like films, films that had that subject matter from the 70s, 80s, and early to mid 90s had a lot of heart to them. They may have not been the best written movies, mind you, because there's plenty of movies, that were made back then that, aren't the best.
They weren't the best, yeah.
But to be fair, when I was in art school, my professor always told me when I was handing in my portfolio, like, your work needs to show love, meaning that you as the artist need to submit something that reflects love and passion into the end product, not something that's copy paste. And that was fun about watching those films from that day and age, because they were fun and fearless, and they took risks, which made them innovative in their own way.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because now that I'm thinking back to it, like, I remember I used to watch like these movies and they were usually on like the IFC or like Showtime, like late at night, where like it would be a totally normal movie. And then all of a sudden you'd find out the character was gay, and that was like part of like the story, but it wasn't like the focal point of it. And it was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. And it's just like, they need to go back to their roots. I'm sorry. Like, not everything needs to be about sexuality all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Even in the early 2000s, there was a TV show called Witchblade that was adapted by a comic book, mind you. And here are the check boxes that were made before there was a necessity for check boxes. Strong, independent lead role, who happens to be a cop and who happens to be bi. They even had an episode where her and her straight partner, who was basically a surfer bro from Cali, went undercover in a drag club, and he was dubbed as the homophobic. Keep in mind, this was like back in 1999, 2000, where conversations like this were occurring, whether it be on a personal level or in cinema, and they addressed it. And at the end of the day, his the guy that was dubbed homophobic actually made best friends with one of the guys hitting on him, and they ended up playing music together at the end of the episode. Like, having speed bumps in modern writing now are not relevant. Like, all they do is they gaslit and vilify and villainize, but they don't address and find common ground and build a friendship off of that. That is lacking versus, like, I keep finding myself going back watching older stuff because of me being entertained by it and seeing all these social issues that we are dealing with now and how they were addressed then.
Yeah. Everything sucks now. Like, you have to go back to like the 2000, like the 90s or like the 80s to find like really good stories now, because everything just sucks now. It's derivative.
Yeah, like I know I'm blabbing on and taking over your show.
That's okay.
But Stan Lee said it best: if you want to make a book or tell a story that has a message, don't bash your audience over the head with it. You can do it in subtle, nuanced ways, explain your side, and explain the other side, and leave it up to the reader or viewer to come up with their own decision. And again, these people say, "Oh, we were hosting a writer's workshop." These motherfuckers need a writer's workshop.
They do. They do. All right, let's continue.
You haven't always been in a position of adapting your own work. You've also been in the position of having to give your work to other people and hope that it would be adapted in a way that was honest and true to your work. Would you mind talking about what that was like?
Yeah, no, I mean, there are a few different there are a few different ways I could attack this question. One thing that I think that, especially if you're coming at this from the Hollywood side, that I would just, internalize in some ways, that so many there right now we're in an interesting moment in the comic industry where there are a lot of these mid-sized publishers, and I've worked with some of them and they're run by very, very nice people, but those publishers have...
I just want to take this super chat from Naruto. Almost 2 hours into the stream, we're finally passing the hour mark on the video. Well, and we're about to get into the Q&A, and the Q&A is the best part. Listen, usually for an hour of stream, I'd be like 3.5 hours on the video. So we're actually going at a clip here today. But guys, mount that like button if you haven't already. We do happy hour every Friday on my second channel, youtube.com/activelyunwoke. Also streaming on Odyssey, Rockfin. I'm usually streaming on Rumble, but I screwed it up. That's my bad. But go ahead and subscribe on whatever platform you're watching on, and join us on weekly on Fridays. There we go.
Kind of,
it's not your fault, Tito.
A scenario
not your
where
fault.
the publishers drive the media rights for those comics, and then a lot of them, they get anxious when there's direct communication between the original creator of the property and the and the people adapting it, because they, as the from the producer side, they are trying to kind of drive the voice of what the sort of thing that they think will sell. That's more of their primary concern, and that's what the contracts say they're allowed to do. So it's like, but I would just always, keep in mind that if you're sort of asking yourself, I wonder if the creator's been looped into this conversation. I wonder if, oh, I shouldn't try to bother them about, I'm dealing with this person, but the conversation's moving forward, but I don't want to, get in their way. They're probably busy and all that. I guarantee you the creator would love to have a conversation with you. I guarantee you they would love to tell you what the heart of their book is and why they wrote it, and in a way that the publishers that they're working for might not have all those answers and might not have asked those questions, and not out of any malice, not out of any ill will. It's not, some terrifying conspiracy, but it is something where I remember being, up and coming and having a lot of books out in the wild, And the early stages, I would never get to have the one-on-one like with the person adapting my work to like really hone it. And you know, the like it's one of those things where like once I rose a few rungs in the industry, now I get to be a part of those conversations. And you know, like, and I think they're like, and then once the companies I work with actually saw how I handled myself when I was a part of those conversations, they continued having me as a part of those conversations, because often I could cut right to like how to sell the book better than they could, because I've been selling the book for the last many years. And it is something where, you know, I'm like, I also like, I want to sell as many copies of all of my books. Like this, they're all deep passion works, but I want them to conquer the universe. Like that's my evil goal. So this is the, you know, so that's like the top line thing that I would say is that, you know, while you're building these things, find a way to reach out to the creator. Like you know, don't ruffle any feathers. Don't like, you know, like obviously some of these situations you don't want to like go too far. But if you ever just sort of like, oh, I noticed that this is happening, but I'm not gonna call it out. Just be like, oh, I would love to have a conversation with them. Like, and I think that will help, like in a big way.
And here lies
and I
the
mean, like
problem.
those are
Hang on. There you go.
And herein lies the problem. He's talking about wanting to have a conversation with the creators of these properties. He must be talking about current writers or current artists that are still alive, because a lot of the stuff that they're adapting today, they're dead.
Right. They're like Superman and things like that.
Like it's like, oh, I really want to know the root of Superman, but I can't talk to the creators because they're dead. Okay, let me sum up Superman for you. It is the story of Moses.
I never thought about it like that. Okay.
Like I'm just being straight up, you know, honest with you. It is legit the story of Moses, written by two Jewish men who happen to be the minority back then. Batman, created by Bob Kane with Bill Finger, by the way. Jewish men who grew up poor and had a fantasy of what it would like to be rich and have a responsibility of giving back to the community. You don't need to have a conversation with dead creators. You need to do the homework and do the research before you start fucking up what we all come to love and enjoy.
Well, and it's like, it seems as though it seems to me that like people could go and talk to someone like you or like a super fan of these people and get all the information they need. Right? It's like you said, like the fans will tell you like you need to do this and this and this. Like you could even do focus groups with them afterwards to like what did we fuck up? What do we need to do differently? Like you could even focus group the script with them, like as you're developing it. Like there's so many solutions to this that it just seems like they're not taking advantage of because they want to force their storyline into the narrative.
And that's perfectly fine. And they're never going to talk to me because I am a toxic fan.
Man.
We are passionate people. We buy the stuff that we enjoy and we share it. We're like, toxic fans are free advertisement to any body of work. If we're passionate about something, we're going to talk about it and we're going to share it. That's marketing you can't buy.
So I this is my one and only bit of comic book trivia. Who created Wonder Woman?
Shit, that I do not remember him off the top of my head, but he was a man raised by a bunch of powerful women, and he was a psychologist that created the lie detector.
He was a psychologist. His name was William Marston. Do you know what else William Marston created?
The polygraph.
Well, that he also did some other stuff. He's the creator of the disc profile, which is what I use to do psychological analysis.
No shit.
Yeah, he's the creator of the disc profile.
Yeah.
There's a whole movie about him called William Marston and like the Women or something like that.
Yeah. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking an established character and expanding on that said universe as long as it fits within the bounds of the rules of that said universe. There's nothing wrong with it. But when you're doing...
That's like what fan fiction is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, see, the beauty with fan fiction is that you're staying within the rules and you're moving forward to a story that is supposedly has ended, or you're doing an alternate take on it, meaning it's like, okay, instead of going down hallway A, what happens if the character went down hallway B? Not like, okay, so the character is straight. What happens if the character, yeah, like fine, you can play in that realm, but you cannot violate that set of characters' rules. To give you a great example, Paramount Plus did the Halo series based on a video game. You never saw that character's face under the mask at all in any game, and I think it took them like 6 or 7 games before you finally saw it. They took off his mask in episode 2. They screwed with the lore and the mythology to push in an agenda.
That's so disappointing. It's like they took out all the good parts then.
There were some elements in the show that were cool, but they missed a point to the rest of it. So
I mean, what you're talking about is it just seems like there is a lack of artistry. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're placing the narrative before the artistry.
You know what? I'm not going to shoot on them because they're able to get published. They're able to write on properties I can only wish or dream to have worked on. I think it's a lack of them caring or not being familiar with the source of the material.
Yeah, but I think that all goes into artistry, though. I think it's like what I hear from you and like, how you describe some of this stuff. It's like a deep respect for what's been created before you, why it was created, kind of like giving bounds to like stay within these, because like constraints breed creativity. Like if you put constraints around people, you're going to get a lot more creativity than if you said you can do anything in the world, because people actually like to have a certain amount of constraints. And it's like, if you're changing everything, then there's no point in following a specific story anyway, because you've changed all the characters. It's not the same story. It's a different story.
Yeah, you're absolutely. And going back to the rules that you pointed out too, right? Good writers love putting themselves in traps like that too. Look at Back to the Future Part 2. They go from the present to the future, go back to the present, but it's now alternated. Then they have to go back to the past to fix everything. So you immediately are restricted, to work within a certain timeline, if you will, to basically restore your future. And that's just going back to like good craftsmanship in your art as a whole. That's just something that takes time and experience to develop. They mentioned earlier in your show, in one of your shows that you like Rivendell, they brought in the time traveler element. What about that don't you appreciate as a fan?
I mean, I don't, because like what I liked about Riverdale was kind of like the love triangles between Betty and Veronica. Like I kind of always like I get that Riverdale's gonna have like some mystery stuff and some crime solving stuff, because that was in the original. It was just never my favorite part of it. I more so liked the interactions between the characters, and I always kind of thought like when it went crazy off the rails, like with like we're talking about aliens and like all this stuff and time travel, it's like, okay, now we've gone a little bit far from why I like this in the first place.
Yeah, so basically you're saying they lost their identity or lost their way.
Yeah, it's like you're trying to take something that's kind of like a wholesome kind of like comic that speaks to, different aspects of the teenage experience or whatever, and you're trying to make it into like an action adventure. And it's like, I don't read Archie comics because I want an action adventure series. If I wanted an action adventure series, I would read an action adventure series. I want like a good wholesome comic. Okay, maybe we do some like mystery stuff. That's fine. It's like Scooby-Doo, like whatever, go solve a crime or whatever. But like, I wanted it to be about the character and about the relationships between the character, not about aliens and time travel and all this.
Yeah, agreed 100%. If the aliens and time travel was already established in that lore prior, I'm sure there wouldn't be a problem with it. But did they just like? I haven't seen the show, so I'm just asking. Like, was it something that was just like forced in or shoehorned in, or was it like?
I don't know. I don't know, because I'm just hearing about it now, because like the first couple seasons, this is one of those things where it was like as the show kind of went on, it went off the rails, because the first couple seasons of Riverdale were fine. It was like it was the main characters. There was some murder mystery going on. There were crimes that needed to be solved. There was character development and relationships built. And then over the course, and I only watched the first couple seasons of it, and I thought it was great, but then I stopped watching TV. It wasn't a knock on Riverdale, which is I didn't watch TV as much. And now I'm hearing they've gone totally off the rails and are having time travel and aliens and like all this stuff. It's like, bro, that's not what Archie is. It's just not.
So really, at the end of the day, you're seeing that they ran out of ideas.
Yeah.
And just simply lost their way.
Tinge says even the actors can't follow the meth-fueled adventure that is Riverdale.
Well said. Said.
Now I feel like I have to go back and watch it to find out how they screwed up this show and like when it started to go wrong. We'll see. Anyway, let's continue.
All right.
Like it goes back to the, the answer to the first question is it's just like, I genuinely believe like, you look at the most successful adaptations of comics to the big screen and the small screen over the last, many years, and they all had direct creator involvement. Like all of them did, especially outside of, like superheroes, it's a little different, like, but in the creator-owned space, the creator-owned works that rose up there, like they had someone in the room who knew the books, who like lived and breathed and loved the books, and that it matters, and and I think it pays for itself. Yeah.
Thank you, James. And on that note, I'd love to touch base with Kim and David when it comes to forming that balance between the needs of the screenwriter who's adapting and the original intentions of the creator. You two have talked very favorably about like making sure that the creator's in the room, getting input from the original vision, which is great. But what happens when there are contrasting interests between the creator and the people up to make it a good television show or a film?
David, do you want to go first or do you want me to go first? I think, it's tough because a lot has changed over the years. I mean, for my company, for instance, like where I work at DC, we have had a TV team only for the last 7 or 8 years or so. It's like, it's been a very small
Lies.
team. It's been
Oh, tell me
Lies.
more. Tell me more. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Lies. She's saying 6 or 7 years. Bullshit. If you remember the WB before CW, what really kicked off the whole DC television show series was Smallville. And that came out
Smallville was great.
And that came out shortly after 9/11, and it was just the thing we needed as a nation, needed to sit down, especially if you're growing up, like in your teens, early 20s, to watch and heal. And it was a great show. Before that, 1993, we had Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman.
Yes, we did. Oh my God, I totally remember that. Also a great show with Dean Cain, conservative.
Dean Cain, Terry Fletcher. And even around the same time period, it may not have been live action, but it was animated. We had Bruce Timm, Paul Dini's Batman animated series, The Adventures of Superman, Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited. So the fact that Kim, I'm calling her out, I don't give a shit, is saying we've only had a small, TV group for 7 years. Bullshit. DC has always been affiliated in television. Look at the 1950s Superman serial TV shows. Look at Adam West and Burt Ward, 1966 Batman on ABC and NBC back in the day. They have always had a footing in television. Linda Carter, Wonder Woman, back in 1970s. Mm-hmm. They have always had a foot. Now, if you want to talk about a dedicated network for broadcasting, okay, you had Fox Kids in the 90s. You had ABC family as well too, all back in the 80s and 90s, and then you had the WB, which is back in the late 90s and early 2000s before it came the CW. So you've had almost 30 years of recent television before you even get to the stuff back in the 60s or 70s. So she is full of shit.
Well, and Red Room Diecast in the chat is saying Smallville can't be made today unless Superman is a cuck. How sad is that? And he's right though, Smallville, and it's not just because that Nexum woman was in Smallville. Smallville literally couldn't be made today.
You know, like Superman and Lois is the closest thing we're gonna get to a modern day Smallville. The first season, phenomenal. It was a great father-mother story of raising teenage kids in high school while one of them's unemployed, one of them's working, you know, without giving too much away. A well-written family show with a superhero element to it. But that the superhero element wasn't the focal point. The focal point was a couple coming together trying to solve everyday problems in a household.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's being bastardized by people like this.
All right, let's keep going.
But in that time, we've reached out to people and we've started, you know, trying to really facilitate those relationships, because I think for us on the superhero side, because I think, James, just to your point, like there is a big distinction between what you're doing with the superhero stuff versus what you're doing with the more creator owned or like the genre. I call it genre versus superheroes or capes and tights. And that's kind of how we differentiate it for ourselves. But like when you're adapting things on the capes and tights side, there have been so many hands, so many like cooks in the kitchen and telling different stories about those characters, that when we go to adapt those types of stories, or when we go to tackle those characters, we as the experts at DC who are familiar with our creators and know the works, we'll try to curate what we think is like really awesome and exciting, and then try to like, you know, get our other execs in the world to read those and help educate them and teach them about the universe, while also explaining the importance of speaking to the different people who have different perspectives on these characters. So I think DC and Marvel in particular have really, really long legacies. DC's been in existence for over 80 plus years, and those stories were created and characters were created during a time when the industry was dominated by straight white men, and we're living in a time where that's changing. Those stories are no longer, those perspectives are no longer the only ones that are allowed to be explored. And so I think that's one of the biggest benefits that I find in talking to the creators, because somebody who's writing a Batman comic,
do it.
instance,
I was like it's gonna happen at some point. Go ahead.
She is full of shit again.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Tell me.
Her point being valid in some cases. Yes, a lot of the classic timely characters before Marvel characters and before DC was Action Comics, their original creators are not only Jewish, you know, hetero men for that we're aware of. They also fought in World War II.
Right.
Now, fast forward to the 1960s, where Timely has now became Marvel. Without the input of Stan Lee's late wife, there would not have been a Fantastic Four. There would not have been an Amazing Fantasies issue 15 introducing Spider-Man, without her being encouraging to encourage Stan to keep on writing. Now, to Ruth Kirby's credit, the wife of Jack Kirby, the king of comic books, without his wife being a strong moral support and also taking care of the house, we would not have our beloved characters, because those two men had a strong support system at home that allowed them to continue to do the work that they were passionate about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for her not to acknowledge that is blatant disrespect.
Well, she can't acknowledge it because that would mean that the family matters. That would mean that the narrative that they're trying to push about, this is the first time we've been able to broach these storylines is false. Like, if she acknowledged that, then her entire worldview would come crashing down around her.
I don't think she will acknowledge it, other than the fact that for the reasons that you should just mention. I think she's just like ignorant to the fact that she's not aware of the history behind the characters that she's, the current caretaker of.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's like, can she even become aware of it too? It's like, even if it's one of those things where, like, even if you put this right in front of her and said, "Let me lay this out for you clearly," she wouldn't even be able to see it. I don't think, because that's what the ideology does to people. It just blinds people.
I'm like, hell, I'll even take it back a little bit further too. When Walt went to go ahead and create Mickey Mouse, it wasn't Mickey Mouse in name; it was a different name. His wife was like, "Try Mickey. I don't like that name. That's shit." So in a way, the women of the household that help support, the breadwinners or the men or the creators, they did have creative input in one way or another to create these characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll give you one more example, then I'll shut up. Bob Kane, when he was creating the Vicky Vale character, you're familiar with her as Kim Basinger in Batman in 1989.
Yeah.
He had a brief affair with Marilyn Monroe, and that's where the character Vicky Vale came from. Now, the backstory is in the comic book, she's a redhead. That's because the printer got the color palette wrong that day on the press. She was supposed to be blonde, which is why Kim Basinger was cast for that role, because she had the same panache as
that makes a ton of sense.
Marilyn
She was
Monroe.
totally playing Marilyn Monroe in that role. Now that you mention it, I never thought of that before.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Is not thinking about the same things going on in the world that may have been happening when the character was first created. So I just think that there is a big distinction between what's happening on the supers versus what's happening in the rest of genre, but you have to talk to the people telling those stories in order to really understand them, as James was saying.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I think part of the problem, right, is I've been in studios where, like at Lionsgate on the film side, we had Hunger Games and Twilight and those franchises going. And to tell you the truth, like those authors were not involved at all. And they were pretty unhappy sometimes about the changes being made on their work. And so part of my growing in this industry as an executive and as a producer is seeing some of that and seeing some of the calls and the emails that would come in and seeing how these people could have bettered those franchises if they were involved. So I'd like to think that now, and certainly moving forward after that point, I've kept creators involved in all of my projects that have been based on some IP or even life rights. When I've done a show like Bonding that's on Netflix now that was based off of a story that I overheard at a meal, and basically then worked with that writer to make it into a thing. And so
we got a super chat for you. Naruto says, Kino, if you haven't already, I highly recommend reading Ilsum from Ripperverse, created by a libertarian anarchist Eric July. What do you think of Eric July and his work?
Well, I'm shilling for him because I have this hat on right now. I will have an actively unwoke hat if there was one in the shop.
Oh, I do need to make some actively unwoke stuff. Like, there's a whole list of merch I need to make.
Like a hat or a sticker. But
yeah,
Naruto, I would also raise you Cyber Frog. Can't see it because of my background. Cyber Frog by Ethan. So yeah, check that one out as well too. Like they're part of the whole Comics Gate as well too. This is the Blood Money box set. So yeah, I love Isum. Can't wait for book 2. I did like I don't know how much money I gave Eric July when that campaign launched though, but he got a lot of it. So probably so. I will as a fan of not just July as a content creator, but as a fan of indie comic books, if you have a solid product, I will back that project, period. Same with yours, Karlyn, as well, too.
Yes, you did. You are definitely a very like important backer of the Schools Exposed campaign, and I really do appreciate it. And I do think it's important that we back stuff like this, and it's really heartening to me. I raised my money for Schools Exposed on Indiegogo, and there are so many. And one of the reasons that I originally launched it on Kickstarter just to get them to cancel it, more or less, to be honest. And Indiegogo was always the backup. But the reason I went with Indiegogo is so many Unwoke creators have launched a project on Indiegogo, and they haven't canceled them. And I'm not saying Indiegogo is perfect, but you got to appreciate, you got to take your wins where you can.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Indiegogo is starting to get bad too, to the point where they'll shadow ban you, where you can only have like a direct link to access certain campaigns. This has happened recently with a number of conservative or libertarian creators that go against the grain, if you will. So
that's disappointing. Hopefully they rethink that.
Well, it's like, when you have an audience like yours and others with similar numbers, though, it's easier to get the message out, though. But yeah, it's a shame that they're playing dirty games like that, though. But as for Eric July and everything, I wish him the best success. I hope to meet him one of these days whenever they do another meetup, so he can sign all my copies and all my merch.
Maybe he'll come to Pork Fest. Wouldn't that be great?
Oh, shit.
It's not like out of the realm of possibility. I'll put a bug in Carla's ear.
Like that'd be awesome if you did. But I will tell you this: I do plan on bringing my copy of Actively Unwoke to Pork Fest for a signing. So that's what I'm planning on doing. So.
Of course, that's going to be a great time. Pork Fest, come to New Hampshire in June. It's going to be great. All right, let's keep going.
Part of, I think, what James has said, and even what Eleanor and Mags have presented, is it's important to look at the comic industry and as writers adapting comics and find the publishers or the writers that have the rights in a way in which they can be involved, and to be working with those publishers and those writers rather than maybe companies that might be more involved or might push those creators out because it's not going to be a benefit to the project. And I think I would be a huge advocate as well, since I work with a company that has a publishing arm, to really, as growing writers in this industry, and if you're a WGA member and you've gotten a few staffing credits or you're getting on your way, like Eric is an example of this too, like go and publish a comic. Like don't just do one or the other, find a way into comic storytelling and be someone that can themselves adapt their own material and show sort of my side of the table and the buyers and the streamers that can be done more and more. And I think one of the really awesome things that I've been able to sort of push for in the last year, even with people like James and Roberto being examples of comic writers that have moved over and done that, as I've been able to move some of my comic creators that we have a showrunner, we have a director on their project and packaged around them. But when we sell it to a network and a streamer, then I'm pitching them for the room to staff them for their first TV credit that they've ever had. And it's because, hey, guess what? We all wouldn't be here unless that writer created this world that we all love. Exactly. So why don't you give them the fucking chance to write on their own show? Thank you.
Let me just do a quick pause to acknowledge this super chat from Dragonwater. To use the left's words, these people are appropriating a different culture. This is cultural appropriation. You're absolutely correct, Dragonwater. This is, if they're taking a story and fundamentally changing it, how could that not be cultural appropriation?
He nailed it right. He nailed it right on the head. Bravo.
Yes, well done, Dragonwater.
And it's worked a few times and I've been able to convince some people. So I think part of that is the strength in the team that you're building. And as writers, find the people that are going to actually give you that pathway and stick with those people rather than choosing companies or publishers or folks that are not going to do that.
Now I want to just go have a drink with David so we can exchange war stories of how many times we've had to have the conversation. Please just listen. A creative consultant.
Oh, awesome. David, that was a super inspiring answer. And thank you for yours as well, Kim. Awesome stuff. Yeah, I have one more question before we go into the Q&A section. So those of you who still want to submit questions, please, now is the time. We've had a bloodbath when it comes to the Warner Media Discovery merger and the decisions that have come afterward. Lots of shows canceled in the superhero space, in the comic book space, with a lot of queer principal leads. That's been disheartening for me personally.
Too
And I
bad,
wonder
so
if
sad.
people in the audience feel the same way. This question is for any of you. What would you say to queer writers wondering how to still get their stories told in this space that seems to be minimizing their voices right now?
I would love to jump in on this.
Please get it.
I am also heartbroken, over the loss of some of the shows that we've, had to say goodbye to. But I do think that there's always chaos in a merger. There's always, heartbreaking things that occur, but there are still people that are advocating, and there are still people that are championing voices. As David, said, he is an advocate himself. I'm an advocate in my own way. When it comes to staffing rooms, one of the things I like to do is try to make sure that there is, some kind of equal representation happening in the room. If there are too many male voices, for instance, I'll start only suggesting female voices. Or, if there's not queer, if there are no queers in the room, or if there haven't.
She's like,
how's that for a male voice for you, bitch?
She's basically saying, I've learned nothing from the fact that people don't like these stories. I've learned nothing. She's like, I'm just going to keep doing this. And if there are too many men in the room, the answer to too many men and is more women. Okay. Like, what the fuck does that have to do with this story?
One of the press releases that came out from the writers of Batgirl said, yes, our script was woke. It happened organically like that. We did not come out with to push a woke message. Bullshit.
Woke messages are never developed organically. It doesn't happen. It is completely counter to the human experience.
Exactly. Now, do I feel bad for some of the stars that were in that movie that will never see their work, to be enjoyed by an audience? Yeah. I feel worse for Brendan Fraser because this is supposed to be the year that he's coming back to cinemas. So I wanted to see him and what he does with the character of Firefly. That would have been cool. J.K. Simmons was supposed to come back as Jim Gordon.
He's so good. J.K. Simmons is amazing.
He was supposed to come back in there as James Gordon. That was going to be cool. We were supposed to have Michael Keaton show up as Batman this movie. That would have been cool. So you have a lot of nostalgia bait sewn into this thing just to be a tax write-off. It's just...
And Dragonwater says it's about erasing men. What do you think about that, Kino?
Dragonwater is exactly right. It's not only just about erasing men, it's also about race and gender swaps at the same time, too. To give you an example, with Marvel's Loki, I always compare that to that whole series to be a show about masturbation. It can be argued it's a show about self-love, but it's an argument of masturbation. To give an example, Loki travels in time. He meets all these different doppelgangers. One of them is female. Nothing wrong with that. Alternate timelines, alternate universe, alternate Lokis. Cool. But but now that you introduce the female Loki, guess what she is? She is smart. She is brave. She is self-taught. She is fierce. She doesn't need to be taught anything. This character was doing magic that our Loki that we're familiar with never knew how to do because he wasn't taught. And this little twit found out how to do it when she was 10 years old. Explain to me as a writer, how does that make sense without going through training or going through a hero's journey of suffrage to develop the needed skills to survive? We don't see that. We're told that she's amazing multiple fucking times.
Mm-hmm.
And another reason why they're going this route as well, too, this is a way for the studios to circumvent and not pay royalties to the estates of the original creators.
Well, and Myriad also has an interesting point. A lot of these men were symbols of capitalism, and I think that's why the core. I think that's the core of why they want to delete all of them. They want to erase capitalism. I definitely think there's something to that, especially when you're looking at like a superhero, or excuse me, a Superman type character, which is like the embodiment of like the American dream sort of thing. And like I think that's definitely true. But I would also say, remember that Marxists don't just want to erase men. they want to erase gender. So it's not actually just about men. It's not about elevating women over men. They want to get rid of the gender binary entirely because the gender binary supports capitalism.
Yeah, another thing that they're doing recently, especially with Marvel Comics, with two characters that I love, Cyclops and Wolverine. Actually, I'll count three for including Iceman. They made a butch character, beast of a man like Wolverine, bi and or gay, just so he can have a three-way with Cyclops and Jean Grey, who by the way, Cyclops is married and or engaged to.
Right.
So it's a way to have you can have a healthy love triangle with great writing without the need of having being, like in your face, like orgies, like being a splash page in a comic book.
Right.
There's tasteful ways to do that. And another character that they bastardized recently was Iceman, another member of the X-Men. Jean Grey, she's a psychic. She can read people's minds, control minds and everything. She's like, you're gay. He's like, what? That character, if he was gay, never had an opportunity to come out of the closet. Instead, he was told, you're this way.
That's awful. I can't believe they did that. Well, I can believe they did that, but that's an awful thing to do.
Yeah.
You got to let people process and come out in their own time, man. Come on.
Yeah. So the fact that they say, oh, we need more this representation, that representation, you hijacking a character and saying, hey, this character is now this, without giving them the appropriate time to grieve, go through the stages of grief and come into acceptance of what's going on, that was blatantly neglected.
Did that character just go, okay, I guess I like dick now? Like, what was the response? Really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's definitely not like real life. All right, let's keep going.
Been any queer voices whose names have come up on lists, I will only suggest queer names at that point. So I think it is all going back to what Thomas so beautifully said earlier. It really is about, I think, having people like us there in the room to advocate for each other and for our stories to be told. Like I said before myself, sometimes you're in a room and you don't know if you have any allies. You don't know if there are any other queer people there. Sometimes I'm the only woman sitting at the table, and that's a fun experience. But it's like there are still good people in this world.
Hang on, Dragonwater had a quick thought about the what we were just talking about in real time came across as mind control and I am gay. Yeah, I mean, well, and that's another thing too, because it doesn't Jean Grey do like mind control? Am I making that up? Or can't she do that?
Yeah, she can, but not to like a degree as others though. But she does have that ability one way or another. Yes.
So maybe she was mind controlling him to make him come out as gay. That's kind of fucked up. That's like grooming. That's fucking she was grooming him.
And let's not forget, folks, that Marvel's owned by Disney.
Holy shit. Wow.
Are still good allies and people who want to help other voices be heard. I think it's just about being your authentic self and speaking up when you can, or if you feel safe enough. Sometimes I understand, like, you don't necessarily
mind controlling people to make them gay is not about being your authentic self.
At least for someone like me, like a bullheaded blue collar girl from Philly, I'll just say what's on my mind.
And thank you for doing that. That was a really, really touching and inspiring answer. It was a tough few weeks there looking at what was going on at the place that houses like my favorite characters of all time.
Mine too.
So it's really nice to know that you've been an advocate behind the scenes. Thank you for doing that work.
And honestly, just to add really quickly, one of the more exciting things that we haven't really gotten to talk about publicly yet is, some of the stuff that we've been designing behind the scenes strategically. I'm going to be a blasphemer and give a little praise to the good old friendly neighborhood rivals over at Marvel. I've always been a huge fan of Young Avengers over there because it was like a whole queer team. And I was like, this is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen. I've never seen anything like this. And so for me, you know, when we've, over the last couple of years, we were charged with filling the YA or co-viewing bucket, you know, the bucket where everybody can come and watch. We put all of our favorite, you know, teen queer characters right at the forefront of that strategy. And I can't speak to the specific characters just yet, but there are some really exciting things coming down the pipeline. And, you know, we do hear you. It's just hang in there a little bit longer and you'll see all the good stuff starting to.
She's talking about Teen Titans, by the way.
Oh yeah, what's that about?
Thank you, Cameron.
Teen Titans is basically the sidekicks of established superheroes. Like Batman has Robin, Aquaman has Aqualad. Then you have Starfire, and Cyborg and a handful of others. They made Robin, not the Robin, the Dick Grayson Robin that we're all familiar with, but made a Robin gay or bi recently.
Oh,
but,
I knew about that. Yeah.
But it goes to show you that the world's greatest detective couldn't figure out what's really on this kid's mind, who has, for, I don't know, 20 years has been a straight womanizer teen.
Mm-hmm.
And now all of a sudden he wants to jump on the gear shift. I don't get it. You know, but and by the way, the Young Avengers series that she's talking about with Marvel failed. Marvel created two characters called Snowflake and Safe Space.
No, they didn't actually do that. Tell me that's a lie.
Karlyn.
No. Why would they do that, Phil?
Someone in the chat, you know, please post a link here.
No, I believe you. Naruto says Loki and female Loki fall in love. Imagine that. Indeed. And they created a character called Safe Space.
And Snowflake.
What kind of fresh hell are we living in right now? I don't get it.
And what pisses me off as a fan, I would kill to be working at a comic book company like Marvel or DC. I've always wanted a job like that. And how the fuck are these assholes getting that? I have no idea. I'm flustered. I don't get it. I really don't. And then they'll make offshoot characters, dubbing them as new. But I'm like, no, you're basically taking an established character and making it fit your narrative and dubbing it new. I'm like, no, you're ruining an established character just to push a shit character, and you're gonna get that book canceled. The book got canceled.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make space for anyone else answering that same question before we move on to Q&A, but I don't want to force you to answer that question either. So if you're good, we can certainly move on to some of the audience submitted questions.
Yeah. Hey everyone, Co-Chair Rob again. I just wanted to, before reading some of the Q&A, and also just want to give a huge thank you and applause to everyone on the panel and our moderator, Eric. That was such an incredible conversation. So thank you all for sharing your experiences. It's funny, a couple questions ago, James had mentioned wanting to see more queer villains. And in our last committee meeting, we actually voted to do a queer villains panel that is currently being just like, it's in it's still the early stages, but there's something wicked in the queer water. So maybe we'll all get back together for a family reunion. So I just felt I had to say that and tease an eventual another panel that the committee is going to be putting on. So I'm just gonna probably pass back and forth with Eric, just reading some questions from Q&A. So if you got them, pop them in there. Also, our staff liaison, Keith, I believe I'm only seeing them as anonymous, so I can't call people out to say, hey, do you want to turn your video on and ask? But we'll see what happens. So our first question seems to be for everyone. who wants to answer, if you are reimagining a straight cis comic book character into a queer trans character, how do you navigate the balance of being true to the IP while also making the LGBTQ identity a genuine aspect of the character?
I just immediately thought of the character Dreamer from Supergirl. We had a character, so I'm going to just tell a little bit about Dreamer because this was just such an amazing story. Dreamer is a derivative character. So we talked a lot about legacy earlier, and how do you take something that has like 80 plus years of legacy and adapt it for a modern audience with queer sensibilities. And I think, you know, the character Dreamer, who was played by the amazing, effervescent Nicole Maines, was originally based on Dream Girl, who was a character from the Legion of Superheroes. And our Dreamer on the show is trans. The character she descends from, the character that is in her lineage is cishet. So what was really cool about this specific story is that in Dreamer's family, every generation, one woman inherits the ability to see or dream future events. And Dreamer, as a transgender woman, is the female of her generation that receives the power. So for me, it was such an inspiring, awesome, amazing moment. It's kind of like when you think about, I'm going to say a little bit out of school, but when you think about Wonder Woman's Island of Paradise and who is welcome on the island and how you treat gender and sexuality and, you know, identity, it's like those stories matter, and that is a space where those people can also exist. Like, we had a conversation not that long ago about core immutables. I saw one of the other questions was, this ties a little bit into like advice for writers and how to adapt. We always look at core immutables. I don't know if that's one of your favorite phrases, David, working in comics, but for us over at DC, core immutables mean like what makes the character tick, what makes them who they are. And we've never felt that it had to do with what they necessarily look like. It has to do with their emotions and what they're going through, their journey, their struggle. So for us, it's like you can take that legacy and you can adapt it in a way that honors and preserves the powers and, you know, what the original intent of the story was, but through the lens of someone young who's living today, who is queer and experiencing this and wants to see themselves reflected back to them in the superhero media they're consuming. So that was one of my favorite things to be a part of.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. And allowing a pregnant pause for anyone else to jump in before we get to our next question.
Yes, Kim's full of shit and she's missing the point.
Kim mentioned that she uses data of how queer stories make money in order to convince cishet people they're worth making. Kim, do you have a go-to case, or do you have go-to case studies you use when you're making this argument?
That's a good question.
What are the best resources that you found makes the most compelling case for this?
That's a really good question. I mean, I don't know. Please, anyone feel free to chime in as well. But I mean, for us, we do have a really wonderful team of researchers that we we ask questions to, and they go out into the world and help find those answers for us. So we do have our own internal team, which is really helpful. But we also do partner up with other organizations like GLAAD, for instance. They always have some really incredible resources. There's they not only do they provide resources for the LGBT community,
So I've been told with people developing shows for like Amazon or Netflix or something, like people will write the script, they'll pitch it to like Amazon or Netflix, and then they send them to GLAAD to get the woke sign off and approval. And if GLAAD doesn't approve of the show, then it does not get made.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I blame Pixar for this.
Why?
So I forget what movie, but one of the writers there developed a tool out of simple curiosity of what's the ratio to male to female characters are in a movie. And then it started being developed further into, okay, what's the race of these set of characters, to the point where the goal was, the intentions were noble, to have an even 50-50 split of screen time and characters, regardless, like of both male and female. Since then, that tool has been bastardized, and if your script fails to have a certain percentile of race or gender over the other, it's not going to get greenlit.
So stupid. So stupid.
And the crazy thing is, again, the young woman's intentions were noble. Out of simple curiosity, she made a tool. But hey, the script doesn't have many female characters in here. What can we do to up them? Can we have like a background character? Can we have like a secondary character, whether it be like a shopkeep, be a woman, deliver a few lines, like something with purpose to enhance the story, along, not a mandate through SAG.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it strikes me like movies like Reservoir Dogs would never get made.
See, that's the beauty with the 90s and indie films back in the day as well too. Like, what's Reservoir Dogs? It's a father-son story.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at the heart of it is a father and son story.
Kind of a fucked up father-son story, but a father-son story nonetheless.
But exactly, that's the exact point. If it does get be made today, if there's any, I hate to say the word BIPOC because I think that's just racist in itself. I'm using their own language here.
Mr. Pink would definitely be made queer. It's true. Mr. Pink would be queer.
I disagree, because that's too on the nose. This can be a straight guy and he's gonna be pissed off about it, and then the gay guys can be Mr. Orange and laugh at him. He's like, "Suck it, bitch," or something, or have a snarky comment behind it. I'm like, if they remake it, to have like a diverse cast of thought in it, I'm like, okay, cool, but Tarantino ain't gonna fucking allow that. And I don't blame him.
That was a great movie. I need to watch Reservoir Dogs. It's been a while since I've seen that movie.
But yeah, I forgot what we were talking about. I'm sorry, I just ranted.
I don't know. Let's keep going. It'll come back if it's important.
LGBTQ community, but it's also for women, it's for people of color. It's like they have statistics on all of these people. You can just go on their website and download it. It's like right there. And I mean, half the time the data matches with what we want to do anyway. Like, we want to tell queer stories because we feel like they matter. The data matches with that. So sometimes it's just a matter of putting a piece of paper with numbers in front of someone to just show them like, hey, here's a little bit of proof. But as far as like a go-to case study or, a specific resource, I think GLAAD provides some of the best, information. And again, I have to give props to our internal research team. They've helped us understand not just the LGBTQ community and what kinds of stories and characters people are craving, but how we can also make our stories inclusive on a global scale. Because I think what's really key is that, when you look at the Justice League, or, you look at Teen Titans, those are Americans, those are American characters. And I think even beyond our sexuality, it's like there's people that are not American. There are other cultural experiences that exist even in the queer community. So
she has never read a fucking DC comic.
Getting the data that tells me about each of the international territories, for instance, and like what kind of TV.
Why do you say that?
The fact that she said that, we have the Justice League, they're all Americans, they don't resonate with people overseas. Bullshit.
Of course not.
And there's in terms of the diversity, in terms of a cast of characters, like if you remember watching reruns of the Super Friends cartoon show, we had Black Lightning in there, African American superhero male. We've had Apache Chief, Native American male. We've had Green Lantern. Now, Green Lantern, even though he was Hal Jordan White, the Green Lantern is like Star Trek of the DC universe. The Green Lantern can be anyone of any race, of any creed, of any alien species. So the fact that she is blatantly neglecting just a handful of characters I just listed is like she claims to work at DC, but she's never read a fucking DC comic book or even watched the cartoon shows from the days of old. Yes, they have the Justice Guild of America as well too, that have other characters from all over the world. Martian Manhunter, he's not even from Earth. So how does the Martian Manhunter represent someone from Europe or Africa or the Middle East?
Exactly. He was from Mars.
Hence the name, Martian Manhunter.
Man. Barbass, when is the next Zoom meeting? Well, we're doing Bitchcraft tomorrow at 3 p.m. if you want to come for that, but the next official one is going to be on Monday at 7 p.m.
You know, in Brazil watch, what kind of people do, or what kind of TV do people in Norway watch, etc. So that we can kind of figure out what excites them and kind of infuse that into what we're doing. It's almost a way of like, sometimes it's like dangling a little carrot where you're like, we have this story that you're interested in, and it just so happens that there's a queer character at the helm or something of that nature, you know? But it's like, I do whatever I can to try and get our stories out there.
Thank you, Kim.
This next question is super interesting. It's kind of about reverse engineering. What are some bits of advice for film and TV writers who want to adapt a movie or TV show idea into a comic book or graphic novel form? I guess, certainly our execs, but also for maybe our writers who have done that themselves, or taken something that they thought might be a movie or a TV idea and actually got it into the world on the page.
Good, got it. I'll follow up.
Yeah, like one thing that I would just say is, like, you need to make sure at like the start of the process that you are like respecting the comic book medium. Like this is a, something that has become like, there are a lot of people who, because, especially over the last several years, a lot of comic IP is like a way to, get your work in front of it. It's like, you have something physical that you can put in front of a producer, like that helps you. And so something that at your heart, but the goal is still the film or television. And that is the thing that it's just like, that might be the goal. That might be where the end point that you want to get to. But when you're sitting down and you're considering, like, I want to bring this to the comic book medium, you need to sit back and think like, okay, in the same way that like, as I'm adapting one of my own series for, for television, there are certain visual angles to that story that, like, that would be too discordant, like, for me to approach in the exact same way. So I have to rethink, like, and I know that I want a discordant note, but it's just like, how do I create that discordant note using the visual language of television? One book that I, highly recommend reading is it's the book Understanding Comics, which, it's a very like, it's like they teach it in all of the, comic schools and all of it. And it's just like, it feels very, it has some basics of the rules of comic storytelling that are just great to ingrain yourself with. And it's a book that I reread every couple of years, and it's by Scott McCloud. So it's just like, I would hunt that down. I would read some comics and like engage with what you are trying to create. And then as you're trying to do it, it's like in the same way that you're trying to find, like, take the beating heart of the thing that you want to be a film or television series, and then take that beating heart and figure out, how do I tell the comic version of this? Not how do I take an existing thing that is fully broken down and all of that I want the producer just to see see what I see as the potential of this. It's like, you also have to consider, it's like, what does the comic book reading audience want? What would they connect to? What are they connecting to right now? What's selling in stores? Like, you need to sort of like, there's a bit of homework to do, but and I encourage you to do the homework.
That's exactly the answer, and part of it is they should not be a one-to-one sort of adaptation in terms of putting your TV show or film idea into a comic. I think everything that James brought up, you really do have to rethink your entire story. You might have to rethink your characters, but you also have to think about the medium. And I think it's important to understand what medium you're working in and why something would work different in a comic than a TV film adaptation. And to me, and we have sort of in some ways taken either writers or filmmakers that have never done a comic from TV and film and help them with our editors make their first comic, but also we've done it the other way, obviously, of getting some writers into adapting their own work. And part of what I try and share with people is you should look at a graphic novel or a 5 to 6 issue arc as maybe the feature, maybe the pilot, but it's not always the same, and it's fluid for every story. And ultimately it takes understanding what visual panel storytelling is like, what turning the pages like, what issue to issue sort of cliffhangers and bringing that readership back is like. To add to James's awesome book recommendations, Scott McCloud also has another comic called Making Comics that is just as important, because it teaches you the process of, as a comic writer, you're going to have to work with an artist, you're going to have to work with editors, you're going to have to work with a letterer, a colorer, and these things are probably not a process that you're used to, but thinking in visual ways on a 2D page is going to be different than writing, filmic description for a director or for an actor to pick up in performance. And Will Eisner also has a book called Graphic Storytelling, and it's about telling stories in a visual narrative on the page and how that's different from TV and film. And so I would recommend to everyone to pick up and know your stuff, but also be open to the fact that your story needs to change in drastic ways, and you might need to rethink or re-break your entire reason for telling the story. And that's okay, because you might create an IP that you as an author will be published, will have something on a shelf that you can pull down, and you may never get a TV or film project made. And sometimes people have entire careers not producing a credit to their name. So be proud of that. And then hopefully, if your intention is to lead to TV and film, hopefully that can be a signpost of, even if you take an idea or the title or a concept, or like we have talked about, the spirit or the heart of the thing, that's still worthwhile, and you still had sort of a roundabout process that is successful, and it doesn't have to be one-to-one, back and forth or adaptation at all.
Thanks, David. And if I could briefly jump in here, on the craft side of things, I adapted my first ever graphic novel from one of my own screenplays, which was never produced. And if you were like me, you came from the school of thought or the school of being taught that as a screenwriter, your job is to minimalize your voice as much as possible, keep everything spare from the dialogue to the prose. You are, at least with features and pretty much with TV in my experience, you're trying to seed power, giving it to everyone but yourself when it comes to a creative vision. That's what I was taught. That isn't necessarily good, it's just what I was taught. And when it came to writing a graphic novel, I had a lot to unlearn. My artist, her name is Ariel, was lovely, so patient. And she was going to need that patience because I was someone who didn't know how to write a graphic novel at all. I was doing it for the first time. There were times when I would just hope that she would psychically understand what kind of shot I was looking for, because in my experience, I've been told that that's the director's job. You do not touch a shot. You don't write that into the script. Take your ego out of it. That was my whole MO, because I was told that was the right thing to do. And wow, I mean, what a wrong way to approach an extraordinarily visual medium where I had a co-director, and I had to recognize that I was a director too. I had to take a little bit of the liberty of being able to write maybe a paragraph instead of 2 lines to describe a shot, and truly tell Ariel what I was going for. It was mentioned a bit earlier, but I brought visual aids, and I let Ariel say like yes or no to those. There were times where she gave me.
Karlyn,
I said this is going to
question for
be.
Yeah. Hang on one.
There were times where she.
Go ahead.
Sorry, like Eric just made the point of saying that the advice I was given was to take your ego out your work, and then saying that that was the worst advice he ever got, received. You as a writer, did you have to check your ego at the door while writing, or what was your process behind it? Because I'm disagreeing with Eric 100% right now.
Have you ever heard of the phrase "kill your darlings"?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever I edit a film, I kill my own babies and rewrite it or recomposite the scene all the time.
Killing your darlings is real. You ultimately like so with my first draft when I'm writing, I write exactly what I want to write, but then like you have to go back through it and you have to have an honest conversation. And I like with Actively Unwoke, man, Actively Unwoke started as something completely different at first, and there were parts of it that I really liked that I was like, this is just not telling the story I needed to tell. It's like it might be like my favorite thing, or maybe even in some cases the nugget with which I started the entire book. Like I remember with Actively Unwoke, I ended up killing so there used to be a whole scene in Actively Unwoke where my friends tried to convert me to being woke, and like the struggle session that ensued, and I wanted to play it out to like explain the language and explain the process. But as I ended up writing the book became something completely different. And I was like, I have to take this out. This looks like personal bullshit. Like, and it's amusing for me, and it would have been greatly amusing for me to have a struggle session that I was in be published in a book about being unwoke, but it was just like it didn't make sense. And so no, I think I'm going to agree with you. Like you have to take your ego out of it for to put the goal and the point of the project at the top.
Yeah, but I'm glad you and I are on the same page with that too. But also to Eric's point, if he's writing a passion project and he's pouring himself into it, and if it's going to be a one-off, that's one thing. But I can't tell if he's talking about writing for established characters and checking his ego, or putting his ego into established characters. Now that's the part that's troubling at best.
I mean, I think there could be places for that, to be honest, but it's also like at some point you have to be honest with yourself about why you're doing something. Is it I can see writers putting themselves into characters, right? I can understand that, but at some point you have to be honest with yourself and say, does this enhance the story, or is this just about me feeling good about putting myself into the characters? If it enhances the story and you're using yourself as a jumping off point to enhance the story, fine. But if that's the case, the character is probably going to become something different than you, I would think.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. Like the purpose behind it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. One thing that James like in the video here, because I'm trying to circle back to the video as well too. Mm-hmm. Said that it's like, hey, when we're doing a graphic novel, whether it be like only like 6 or 12 issues or however many issues, I think he said look at what's trending and what's selling and do that. I'm like, no, if you do that, nothing's going to sell because nothing's selling right now. And what made the Dark Knight Returns so successful, the graphic novel by Frank Miller from back in 1985, the reason why he wrote it is because he was at the age at the time, he's older than Batman, and he wasn't going to allow that. So what did he do? He made Batman older, a more like a wiser, seasoned veteran, and Batman up to that time was the campy Adam Westbrook Ward show from the 60s. So he made it dark and brooding and took it back to the roots. So essentially what Miller did was the complete opposite of what James is doing. And I think we had someone in the chat on your stream, Vincent, he pointed out something interesting too. Graphic storytelling is sequential to comics and sequential art. The second won't make sense without reading the first. What bad advice? Yeah, that's it right there.
Yeah.
He called it out, and he's absolutely right. He's on fire with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the fact that it's like, oh, we have to make a graphic novel for today's time, like, no, you don't. You do the opposite. Do the opposite of what's not selling, and it's most likely going to sell.
I mean, a great story should transcend the time in which it was written, I would think.
Yeah, like I can see there being elements of like some of the art styles of the age or technology, as background pieces, but that shouldn't be the staple of the book. And to your point, you're right. Stories like these should be timeless.
Yep. Let's keep going. All right, guys, we got about half an hour left of this. They're doing Q&A right now. I will say the new Twitter files are dropping right now about the ban of Donald Trump, and so I'm looking forward to reading those. It seems like Matt Taibbi's being a little bit more in depth than his first Twitter drop, but that'll be waiting for you on Twitter when we're done. So please mount that like button. Let's wrap up.
Gave me layouts of things that she wanted to do that improved my story that I hadn't thought of because she was there. But I needed that kind of help because the screenplay had just become this kind of bare bones exercise where I was kind of this ghost and I was writing a blueprint. And that's not what comic book writing is at all, in my experience. When you're trying to go from writing a screenplay to writing a comic book, you can feel free to take just a little more power for yourself. Your eye is what's going to make this entertaining, and there's still going to be someone you have to collaborate with, but you do not have to make yourself fade into the background. People are there to engage with you, to play in your sandbox, have fun with it. That'd be my craft advice from my crash course that I got a year ago.
Well said.
Well, thanks. We have another question. What advice would you give to an LGBTQ plus staff writer on a show run by a cis or straight showrunner who are dealing with queer characters and stories, but not feeling entirely heard or represented when it comes to being rewritten by higher level straight and cis writers? So, gosh, in these instances, it seems like the people in the position of power are cis and straight. The people who are not in the position of power are not, and they're not being heard all the time. How does one deal with that?
I have some very real advice, I think. It's not the advice I want to give, but maybe the advice that's necessary, which is like, as a staff writer, you have very little power, right? So pick your battles and be really strategic and thoughtful about how you want to deal with that, but just really try to pick your battles, because what you really need is mental health and the capacity to have a longevity in this industry and to kind of keep a sustained interest in what it sounds like you have, which is like a genuine desire to disrupt this model that is systemically broken, where the staff writer who represents the marginalized group is the person with least amount of power, and then you're trying to convince people who are telling your stories or stories that relate to you that how to do that, and they're not listening. That is a problem in so many different ways right now in rooms, and I think it's the way that you can really, or the way we can all kind of get screwed by that, is if we exhaust all our emotional energy trying to save someone else's story from their own from their own failure of understanding and empathy. And so I think letting people fail is okay. I think saying your piece and having your own integrity and picking your battles, but really just trying to think about, how do I sustain my own career, and how do I make sure that I resolve this issue going forward as I get higher and higher up. And as you get higher and higher up, you will have more and more of a say. So there is like a light at the end of the tunnel. But I know that's not like the sexiest advice, but it's really, for me, that's been my experience. Like you pick your battles and just don't exhaust yourself over other people's inability to listen to you.
Totally agree. And just want to add on to that, I'm someone who puts a lot of pressure on myself. I think there are other queer people who do that too. And that's all of us. And I think, especially when you're the only one of a certain identity in a room, at least in my experience, I put a lot of pressure on myself. And it's like, you know what, if there is something that is a fight that like you lost, or you really feel like it's not going the direction, it's like Thomas said, it's just like it's picking the battles, and it's knowing that like you know, I feel like the weight of the whole community can feel like it's on your shoulders, and I feel like sometimes the environment makes it feel that way, but that's not true. That's just not true. If this goes through and it's, I feel like I can spiral out of control if it's like, oh, if this is offensive to, or other trans people see that, like I'm gonna lose my trans card, or or whatever. It's just none of that is the case, and I think it is about, like Thomas said, about longevity, and at the same, because the other token of that is like the stuff that we make on our own and the stuff we're developing, the stuff we're pitching, that's where we can die on all of our hills, like, because this is our thing, this is our thing, but I that's where I try to redirect my energy, but yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Eleanor.
Let's go to the next one. We kind of touched on the topic a little bit earlier in passing, but didn't really dig in. As storytellers and creators, how do we combat toxic masculinity in our industry?
No,
and fandom?
no,
Should somebody
no,
get a
no,
bisexual?
no. Oh my God. Okay, hang on. We got to do the super chat first because I really want to listen. I want to listen closely to the answer to the toxic masculinity question. But Naruto says, one of my favorite movies, The Ringer, wouldn't be made today. For anyone who doesn't know, The Ringer is about a guy played by Johnny Knoxville named Jeffrey Dahmer who rigs the Special Olympics. Yeah, I remember that movie, Naruto. That's not one of my favorites, but I love that you love it. But I mean, there's so many movies that wouldn't get made today. I even think back, we've talked about having April in April for movie club. It's going to be Karlyn's month of narcissism, and so I get to pick out all the movies for movie night for locals. And we've talked about doing like Gone with the Wind, which is one of my favorite movies. Gone with the Wind wouldn't be made today. It's like there's so many great movies that wouldn't be made today. Good Will Hunting probably wouldn't be made today. Like I mean, how many, like what are some movies that you can think of, Kino, that wouldn't be made today?
Shoot.
So many.
Like other than the obvious, like Blazing Saddles for one, I'm gonna say, and this is a long shot, but hear me out. Problem Child.
Oh, Problem Child definitely wouldn't be made today. Yeah, I don't think so.
Like another one that probably wouldn't be made today. Shit. Yeah, you're gonna have to come back to me on that one.
There's so many.
Like,
I mean,
like any of the, like, to be fair, any of the black exploitation films of the 70s probably wouldn't be remade today. We have parodies of those movies, like one of which is Black Dynamite, that was made back in 2007, starring Michael J. White.
Mhm.
That movie was excellent. It knew it was a parody that took itself seriously, but not meant to take itself seriously. It was fun. I can tell you what shows that won't be remade today. That's probably gonna, like, the one show with Archie Bunker in it. Like,
oh God, no, that would never be made today. No.
yeah, like, forgive me.
Even like Family Guy. If Family Guy had had not started earlier, that probably wouldn't have been made.
Well, it's gotten canceled 3 times, to be fair,
Yeah.
but it came back
because it was good. It was a good show.
Like Simpsons probably wouldn't have been have made today. Like it came out and right at the tectonic shift plates of entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
It was all about the timing. I'm in the heat of the night. That's a good one, Sin. Oh yeah, Tropic Thunder with Robert Downey Jr.
God,
doing blackface.
Tropic Thunder would never be made today. That was a great movie. That was hilarious. Married with Children. Yep, definitely would not be made today. Beavis and Butthead would not be made. South Park never would have gotten off the ground if they started it today. Yeah, never.
I can pick shows easy, but with movies, it's a little bit harder for me because I can't see why not they won't be made today, with the exception of Blazing Saddles, again, for obvious reasons. But I would love to see an attempted, respectful shot at that movie.
Man. All right, let's keep going.
Actual Superman or a gay Iceman comic character onto the screen. The internet is dark and full of terrors. Go.
I'm already afraid. Well, we have our bisexual Superman in the comics. I know the question is talking about on screen, but the son of Superman, John Kent, was recently he recently came out, and
Look at the
you know,
glee.
I would love to see
recently
him
came
on
out.
screen
Like, fuck
someday.
you, lady.
But
Come on.
it's so new. I mean, I think it really, as far as these iconic characters go, I think the more people speak up about the versions of the characters that they want to see, the more people listen at the top. I think it's a precarious, sometimes political game we have to play when it comes to certain characters. I mean, I think there's still a lot of battles. There are still a lot of battles to be fought. But as far as toxic masculinity in our industry and fandom is concerned specifically, I think what I've come to find is that there's usually a very large or very vocal but small group of people that are the toxic ones. And I think the majority of fans and the majority of people consuming this media, they're good people. And I don't think that, you know, they're as vocal. So I think if you are an ally, again, just like you kind of use your voice and support. I think that's all you can really do. But we try not to, at least I try not to listen to the toxic minority that is like on Twitter. I don't know how you guys deal with it, but I know fans
We
can be
are
really
legion.
intense to the point where they
We are not
analyze
the
the
minority.
screen and,
We
like,
are
you know,
legion.
analyze what's
Mhm.
on it. And I know Roberto and David, you guys come from the world of comics and adaptation, so you guys definitely know how crazy that can be.
I just have to say, I am obsessed with the bisexual Superman comic book.
Is he not adorable and amazing and
love
perfect?
that
love it.
character.
Right?
I love that character. And I don't know when this started happening, but it feels like over the last year, especially DC, has been doing such great God's work with the variant covers that talk about money talks. I'm like, I want to buy this comic book. I need this cover. And if these comic book covers had existed when I was 11 or 12, I think
Would've changed
I'd be
everything.
president of the United States right now, because
I literally
it was
made
like,
that
I'm
joke
like, this
yesterday.
is incredible that this is a Nightwing comic book, you know. And it just reminded me, like, one of the first kind of adaptations I did was a very unofficial adaptation of Archie comics where Archie was gay, and it was a play. And I got into all kind. I mean, it was totally unauthorized, and I got into so much trouble. So it's incredible, and I do think representation, even in a comic book, is the start of that journey to the big screen. But I love the Son of Kal comic book. I'm so happy about it. I just bought a new one today.
Oh my gosh. I mean, I can take zero credit for that. I work in TV, not publishing, but I will
but
say,
still,
super fan.
Yeah, I love that comic too.
yeah,
Big time.
great.
And
Yeah.
it's already
Keep your eyes
canceled.
peeled for more.
Yep.
I think, like I said, I think DC, there's been a lot of change. And I think it's just about a matter of using your voice when you can, especially in fandom. Fans of the media are vocal to begin with, but it's getting the good folks and the supportive folks to use their voices that I think is sometimes the challenge.
I'd love to add on to that. I worked in a particularly great room that was completely anti-assholes, very, very, very against toxic masculinity, to like a kind of Edenish degree. It was just a paradise of people who were very decent. And anytime anyone asks me what my experience is like, I just gush about them because I want to. But I think one side effect is that it's normalizing what I value. And I think the best way we can, it's pretty indirect, like, because we don't have power all the time. Those of us who are trying to come up the ranks as writers, But when it comes to destroying toxic masculinity and creating more of a space for people who are anti that, I would say shout the praises of everyone you see doing things right every time you can.
Yes.
That's going to mean a lot to them when it comes back to them, but also just the principle of it. It shows everyone that all of us really, really care about this issue. So if you're in a position to, whoever asked this question, that's what I'm trying to do so far.
Get all your
hopefully
friends to tweet.
Yeah.
Beyond that, get all your friends to pick up the comic books. Like, this is, the other great way to vote is with the wallet. Like, this is a,
You got something to add, Kino?
Yeah, like James just made a solid point about the best way to vote is with your wallet.
Yes.
And they also made mention earlier the number of different variant covers for gay Superman per se. Like what they did was a successful ad campaign to piss off a lot of the established fans to push a book to sell variant covers. Now, this is nothing new to the comic book industry, especially with the death of Superman that had maybe 3 or 4 different variant covers. The variant covers of the 90s with Marvel was notorious because they printed them like junk bonds. They did the same thing with that to grease the wheels and also to cook the numbers on their books. But regardless of how many variant copies were sold, it's still not a bestseller. So it's a last-ditch effort to sell books when they're just on hype alone. There's no substance behind it.
Well, I mean, but there's no substance behind these people in general. And I think that's the general theme for today. It's like, it's all about identity. It's not about substance. It's not about character. It's not about story. It's just about identity.
Yeah. It's like, I wish there was more to it than just that, because otherwise we would have some pretty awesome stories for them to tell, but it's just the same rinse and repeat storyline and plot. Unfortunately, and it sounds like a lot of these writers are in an echo chamber that's a giant circle jerk.
Yes, I agree with that, absolutely.
It's just
they're only listening to the people in the writers' room, and the writers' room happens to be woke.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah, the sad thing is just like, this should be the best time to be alive in terms of this form of entertainment. If you're a superhero fan or comic books fan, we have a plethora of entertainment to choose from both Marvel and DC, but no one's watching it. It's from a number of factors of just simply being burnt out because we have too much of it, and or just lackluster writing of these characters. So, like, I hope. I don't want any company to fail or crash, though, but a crash needs to occur for them to regroup and rethink their strategy for us to get some good quality to be pumped out of these machines. If not that, support your local artist.
Sometimes things need to get worse before they get better. Sometimes it's better to let something crash and then you rebuild from the ashes. It's just the way it goes.
Agreed. 100%. You're absolutely right about that.
Yep.
I spent 10 years writing superhero comics at DC, and as like a fairly prominent queer queer creator, I definitely had I never got the firestorm that some people that I'm very close to have gotten, but this is in learning like how to engage, or not engage is the wrong word, use it, figuring out how not to engage with that aspect of the fandom, and out of some deep like a very powerful chip on my shoulder, and all of it's so much of it is about endurance. Like, so much of it is about, like, this is, we have made extraordinary ground. Like, we've taken extraordinary ground over the last decade in in comics in particular. Like I remember just a few years ago, some of the things that are happening right now in like specifically DC Comics would never have happened. Absolutely not. I know because I was in the rooms where those ideas were shot down, like in extreme ways. And seeing the people actually able to step forward with them is like really, really something. And I am like, that's the biggest thing that I want moving forward is just like, I want to make sure we keep the ground we've taken, like, because, we're going, like, knock on wood, we're all gonna be around this industry for a very long time. And the goal is, and that during that time, the culture is going to swing like a pendulum from like moments of like conservative moments and like very liberal moments. And we need, in the moments that the,
Thank you for that
pendulum
note,
swings in
Vince.
a direction that is not in our favor, we need to make sure we hold on to the ground that that we've taken. We need to make sure that we continue to support each other and make sure that we keep each other in this industry. And it's all about community. And that's one of the things that, frankly, the other side understands, is that like these, the reason some of these groups, these fan groups, feel like they're so like all encompassing and all powerful and can dominate the conversation is they've built these little communities where they like share and support their own ideas, and then they go out and then they torment people online. And it's just like, we need to show that our community stands together as well in the face of that.
Oh my god, is he basically dismissing the people that love these characters so much that they create entire worlds around them and develop their own stories and create their own communities? And he's kind of like, that's nice, children. That's nice. But now we're going to come in and we're going to tell you the real story that you should be excited about. Yeah, that's what he just did. That fucker.
That's exactly what he did too. And
It's so condescending
you know
to
what?
the people that are paying your bills.
You know what? I guess these people don't like to make money.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And there's a reason why these. I feel like I keep on repeating myself though, but the more you alienate your audience, whether it be on the screen or on social media, you are losing money. If you want to cater to a niche audience, that is not sustainable to keep the level of quality to these films up. You're going to have to start downgrading to do smaller projects to be profitable instead of having these multi-million-dollar blockbusters that are tanking at the box office.
Right. It's just so stupid. You have a built-in audience of people who are like, take my money. And you're like, no. No, we don't want your money. We're going to create new stories to try to appeal to new audiences who don't even like these stories in the first place. It makes no sense.
One thing to their credit I will give them regarding Rings of Power in Amazon, they alienated that a multi-generational built-in audience.
Oh yeah.
Okay, to such a point where the books were selling more than anything else like in a long time. Like this show was so bad that the parents of these kids that be watching the show like, no, this ain't Lord of the Rings. Let's watch the Jackson films or let's read the book together.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only justice that came out of that show. And with such a massive fan backlash, I'm not just talking about fans with the United States. We're talking about a book that has been reprinted in more languages than any other piece of literature on the planet that I'm aware of. You basically have a global backlash, and Amazon needs to start listening to it. If not, this show ain't gonna last 5 seasons. They'll be lucky to last 3 if they stay the current
It's gonna bankrupt Amazon if it stays the current course.
I'm one to believe that whole show was one giant tax write-off in one way or another, meaning the token estate got $250 million just to have the rights to the appendices, only 146 pages, mind you. That does not allow them much wiggle room to adapt anything of real substance. And it basically turned into a poorly written fan fiction by non-Tolkien fans or readers. Hell, even the actors and actresses didn't even bother reading the books because they said it was too long.
So stupid. Like, why do you even accept roles if you aren't going to try to learn the character? It just makes no sense.
And also, to be fair, some of the characters too are newly created characters, and not like so not all of them were. A handful were though, but I'm like,
like I never read Tolkien because and everyone tried to get me to do it, and I was like, no, I'm just not interested. So I understand not wanting to read Tolkien because it's like complex and there's a lot going on and there's a different language and all this stuff going on. But like I didn't accept a role as a character in a film that is based on the books. Like there's just like a basic level of responsibility.
I'm like, hell, even in the Peter Jackson movies, all like if you ever watch the extras, like the behind the scenes stuff, like you've seen Elijah Wood and the other actors that played the Hobbits, Sean Ashton Scott, in between takes, guess what's underneath their chair other than their script? The fucking book.
The book. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So.
All right. Got about 15 minutes left, guys. Let's wrap up for today. Thank you for bearing with me, Kino. I know this is a long one.
No, thank you for bearing with me and my shenanigans.
I love it. Love it.
Thank you, James.
I just want to add on to Eric what you were saying about singing praises of spaces where like the opposite of that is happening. I think I'll probably speak for Thomas, and like the last writers room I was in we were an all trans writers room. And I believe the first one that's ever happened.
An all trans writers room.
It was also
Holy
a very like
shit.
idyllic Eden experience for all of us, just being like trans nerds in a room who didn't have to. I mean, I could talk about it for hours, but like we didn't. There was just like all the characters were trans. We were all trans, and that was it. And we didn't have to talk about all of the other stuff, and we got to tell incredible story that definitely has never been told before. And a huge credit to it was our showrunner and the way she ran the room from day one. And I've been someone who's been singing the praises of this, and I think it's just I think it's important to remind ourselves, or at least for me, I get really discouraged and think like, well, it's just the way this industry is. If we've got to like, and it's like, no, it's not. These spaces can work differently. There can be spaces like that work really well. There can be spaces like Roberto's rooms where everyone is listened to. And I mean, I think on Pretty Little Liars, it was like almost an all-female room, and that was really important because like all of our voices were integral to that and were heard. And I think it's just kind of popping that, at least for me, that illusion that it's like, well, this is
having
just
a lot of feelings about her saying she was in an all-female writers room,
like a certain type of person
expressing the female voice.
And I think as queer people, like we learn to trust our instincts and trust ourselves, and I think we can do that in storytelling as well.
Yeah, just to jump on, just because Eleanor's so right. I was thinking about that room as the whole time we were all talking, and I just feel like now I need to make a little counterbalance to my earlier advice, because I think that's actually what I was thinking of talking to the staff writer, in the situation they were describing, because exactly, like between creating our own work and also actually there is a whole new school and generation of people who are changing the industry right now, including in leadership. And that room in particular was amazing. But I've worked for now multiple showrunners who I think are really trying to change the way rooms are run and change the way stories get told. And I think there's a real genuine push to do that. And to James's point, it really is about singing praises and also like continuing to build that coalition out together and like making those values known. But I think there's a real hunger for that. And so that's why there is light at the other end of the tunnel.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. There's kind of a corollary to this in the chat. And then I had kind of a popcorn question that I wanted to ask based on what everybody was talking about so eloquently. But in the chat, how do you, as an adapter of a beloved IP, or as the creator of it, even engage with the positive side of fandom?
I mean, for me, it's why I love conventions. Like, I've started going back to them over the last few months, and it's incredible. It's incredible to actually, it reminds me so much of why like I remember being in their shoes. I remember going to San Diego for the San Diego Comic-Con for the first time and sitting in panels listening to my favorite creators. I remember, you know, like dreaming of walking like through this world and being a part of it and getting a chance to, you know, write these characters that I would just stay up late at night and like imagining stories about. And you know, getting to like when you actually get to engage with the fans face to face, especially away from the internet, away from all of it, it's just like there's so much love and deep passion, and it's just like you remember and like my favorite are seeing like, because I have fans that, you know, because I write, you know, hard-edged horror books and also like, you know, young adult, like, you know, queer fantasy books. And it's just like my favorite things is when like the guy who looks like he's gonna come up with a stack of the, you know, all of the hard-edged horror, the scariest stuff that I've done, and he has the stack of the YA books and he wants to talk to me about like, you know, someone who's like, this is the first book they've ever read with a queer lead, and like they're just like delighted by it, and it's just like, oh, it's so fascinating that you can approach fantasy from this angle and they never thought of it before, and it delights them. Like then, you know, and then it's like seeing the flip side where it's like my queer fans show up and they love the like real messy dark horror stuff, and I love having conversations with them. Like this, it is just like you engage, you get to see and feel the, you know, like the vibrancy of the people actually engaging in these works. And it's the, you know, it's why conventions are exhausting. Like at the end of a convention season, like give me a month, I'm going to be like, oh my God, I never want to go to a convention again. But they can bring so like until next season, and then I'll start going again. But then it's like, it brings so much like love and joy, and that, you know, like that is one thing that I know is a little more difficult to replicate on the TV side, in the TV film side, but it is like just such a, I'm so grateful for the world of comic conventions and like store signings and stuff like that.
These people are so toxic.
Oh my God, they're awful. They're awful people.
It's like fandom.
Hang on, hang on. Go ahead. Sorry.
Fandom isn't toxic. Fandom is so inclusive. It's for everyone. You know, like period. Like for you know, like just to give you a quick example, like you said you never got into Tolkien. I can recommend something for you and that I'm sure you'll enjoy.
Yeah,
that's the beauty of fandom. It's available for everyone, and these people are like, oh, the only reason why the only way it can be available for everyone is that if we, you know, force these characters. And I'm like, no, you are dividing a community that has stood strong for ages. There's no need for that.
I mean, I mean, these are people coming together who love a story and who love characters. And it's like, how can you create they're literally creating an environment that is exclusive of the people who love the characters the most to be allegedly inclusive of everyone, but it's not inclusive. It's excluding the people who love the characters the most.
Exactly. It's not welcoming, you know, like me as a fan is to you, to the world of Tolkien by recommending Tales Before Tolkien, by the way. Check that out.
Right.
But it's the complete opposite of what they're preaching.
Yeah. God. They ruin everything. They really do. All right, guys, go ahead, Phil. Or, you know.
Yeah, there's no love.
And that's what it is. Like, these people don't have love for the characters. They don't have love for the story. They're just using it for their own purposes. All right, guys, we got 10 minutes left. Mount that like button if you haven't already. Let's wrap this up.
To just say one small thing, which is that I'm not someone who has a big history in the comic space. So Umbrella Academy was really my first project in this space, and I had no idea what to expect, and I was a little bit scared given that there's such a rabid fandom for the show. I just wasn't sure how they were going to react, you know, and so I was blown away by the response that people had. Really long-term fans, like super fans of the show, who really embraced Victor's story in particular. And I think I found it like
Apparently not
incredibly
enough.
heartening, especially given the kind of, I guess I was sort of prepared for the worst. And it really, I mean, there were obviously people who were going to have their feelings, but it was really inspiring actually. And I felt like instructive way beyond the comic space or beyond even the industry to see how fast people could adjust, you know, and understand. And, you know, it just felt like a much bigger thing to see that reaction. So the positive side, at least in my experience on this show, was really phenomenal. And it really kind of went against, I guess, the stereotype of what sometimes super fans supposedly can act like.
Awesome. You know, I think we're going to be wrapping up at 9 o'clock. So I think the first question in the chat right now is an amazing question to end the panel on. So if Mercedes is here, and if she's willing to throw her video on and ask her question of the panel, otherwise I'll read it out. I'll do a pregnant pause.
It's very misogynistic for him to keep saying pregnant pause. I just want to say very misogynistic indeed.
Oh, she
It's
doesn't know how to do
patriarchy in
that.
action.
Technology.
That's okay.
That's not a question. So what do you feel were the best ways that showrunners you've worked for have made rooms feel like a safe space? Or for Roberto as a showrunner, how have you made everyone feel the room is the place where everyone is heard?
I can start. You know, it's funny. I've been really lucky. My almost every show I've worked for, my showrunners have always been queer people. My first show was Big Love, and that was run by Mark Bjolson and Will Shepper, and they were writing partners. They were life partners who got married during the show, and then I worked for Ryan Murphy.
I just want to take this super chat from Naruto, and again, everyone should thank Naruto for this this happy hour today because he's the one that brought this panel to my attention. Great job. Fun fact, the anime and manga community are very strict about comic accuracy. The comic book community needs to be more like anime because they're Japanese. That's why, because it's Japanese.
And then I worked for Greg Berlanti. So I never went up, you know, with that. And you know, it's funny. I feel like when I started, I think the era of like true. I mean, I'm sure there are still pockets and stuff, but the era of true like horror stories about and you know, like some of my friends who have been doing television longer, 15 years, 20 years, however long it is, those incredibly shocking stories, you can't kind of believe that they happen. I have been very blessed and never experienced that. And you know, Ryan and Greg, so inclusive, and then I think at the forefront trying to set the tone and say, if you're in this room, if you're at this table, and I've never been someone who's like hung up on writer's title. Like if you're a staff writer, if you're a story editor, if you're a I don't know what I truly don't know what most of the writers' titles in the room are. If you're in the room and you're at the table, it's because we want you to be at the table and you want to hear your voice. I have been occasionally in rooms where I've been either mid-level or whatever, and someone will say something to a staff writer, and it's like, why are you doing this? Like, this person is here, they have something to contribute. You didn't hire this person, someone else hired this person. But that's luckily that hasn't been the norm. Again, in my mind, it's like, if you're at the table, there's so much that we need, so much help we need showrunners to make full shows. You're just there and try not to think about things like titles and things like that, and yeah, just kind of try to be respectful and accept that other people have different points of views, and that probably, and they may be right and often are right.
Yeah, and off of that, as an executive producer that has put together several rooms, I want to sort of speak up on the fact that you are hired for a reason. You went through staffing both on the studio side, the producer side, the network and buyer side, and sort of your voice is integral to that room, and the showrunner has chosen you for a reason. Sometimes you do have to navigate politics, and you have to navigate everything that is sort of the bad side of being in a room and being a lower level writer or otherwise in that space. But remember as well that you do have people on your side that can be advocates for you, like a Kim, like myself, you know, someone that either you met with as part of the process, or a producer that you might know that has been in and out of the room, or that you've met on set when you're producing your episode or something. Like, do go to those people or lean on those people. And, you know, I want to reiterate what Thomas said too, is like, ultimately your mental health and your experience and your career is going to be the most important thing. So tread lightly, but also see who you can lean on, even if it's, you know, someone within that room that is an advocate for you, or can just give you advice on when to speak up or how to pitch something in the room, or talk to your showrunner. And hopefully you'll find that in a room that you're in.
Cool. All right, Rob, did you want to give us that
The
final
floor is
Q&A?
yours, Eric.
All right. All right. This is for everyone, an anonymous, really fun question to end the panel on. Thank you, Rob, for thinking that way. What is your dream cishet legacy comic book character you hope to see queered up?
Oh no!
See a queered up adaptation.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh no! Oh
My
no!
dream was realized. I was in the 90s. It was all about Superboy and Robin being queer, and like that was what all the fanfics were about. Like Roberto knows what I'm talking about. Thomas, everybody's like nodding, like yes, you guys were all part of the same live journal communities as me. I got my queer bisexual Superboy, and I got my queer bisexual Tim Drake Robin. I got them both in the same year even.
I'm ready to see a polyamorous relationship between Cyclops, Wolverine, and Jean Grey. So
No!
Please have that. Can they just be a throuple?
Yes.
Bastard covered
bad.
bastards.
There in its
No!
subtext, and I just
Totally
want to see
there.
it
This
happen.
is so uncomfortable to watch. I can't stop.
They are bastard covered bastards.
The
filled
comic
with
I read
bastard
growing up
filling.
most religiously was Wolverine, because he seemed so trans in retrospect, and I just don't know why the world doesn't understand this, and I feel like it has to happen. So
Can we talk about how his OG height was 5'3"?
that's what I'm saying.
5'2", get your facts straight,
I'm here
bitch.
for this.
I mean, all of these are great examples. It's funny. I when I was a kid, I was always in love with the Jimmy Olsens, the Dick Graysons. I was always like the young ward of. I was like, I would love to date Jimmy Olsen. I would love to date all those characters. So any of them.
Eleanor, were you going to speak?
Oh, I was gonna say one, and this is for Kim. If you want to take this back to work, I've always seen Poison Ivy as trans, and
Oh my
No.
god, that's genius.
No.
just needs to happen. But also, I really want like a trans lesbian like action adventure story on Themyscira. I was like, that's really
For
Just
fuck's
you wait.
sakes.
Just you
Yeah.
wait.
oh okay. Great.
Just you wait. We'll talk.
I have to echo Kim's. It was Tim Drake for me for forever and ever. Like I used to run like a Tim Drake Tumblr when I was in like college, and yeah. So
Fucking Tumblr.
I
Tumblr
scrubbed
ruins
the
everything.
internet of like all existence of that. Like when I started
If
writing
Tumblr was blown up,
professionally
the
for
world
DC
would be a better
Comics.
place.
I'm gonna send you an email too, James.
But no, I was just, yeah, it's like, I was so happy it was happening, but it was like I wanted to do that.
Hey, still good. You still can tell those stories.
I'm like,
I have one out of spite. There was a time when Miles Morales was a new thing and the internet was going insane. And Brian Bendis was out here just like, hey, created a new character, also named Spider-Man.
No,
and it took my breath away. It was so much
Miles
fun.
Morales
And
is
don't quote me on
Miles
this,
Morales.
but I think his co-creator, Sarah Pichelli, said something to the effect of, and why can't we have people like this, like Miles Morales? Why can't we have like a black or a gay Spider-Man? Just off the cuff. It got quoted. And then like just the internet went nuts. Like, what are you talking about? A gay Spider-Man? She didn't actually say Miles is gay. But now, out of complete spite and pettiness, I'm going to have to answer this question with Miles Morales must be queer in some way going forward whenever he's on screen.
God damn it. Why?
That character is the checkbox that keeps on checking. I don't know what else to say about that. Miles Morales,
it's actually not from an American comic because I'm a huge manga fan and I'm obsessed with the magical girl genre, particularly Sailor Moon. And I would just love to see the queer take on the magical girl genre. I think it's ripe. But yes, also like very much Connor Tim Drake stan over here a little bit.
This room knows what's up.
We know what's up.
It was there.
Yeah. Well, we're a little past 9 o'clock, but thank you so much to this incredible panel. Again, a huge round of applause to our panelists, to our incredible moderator, to Eric. This has been so.
I have to stop it. I have to stop it. I can't do. We've done 2 hours. I can't do it anymore. Final thoughts, Kino.
These people, I am grateful for the stream. I'm grateful for being on here. I'm grateful for you in the chat putting up with my shenanigans. But the one thing I'm grateful about is that they said all the quiet parts out loud. And they've been saying this shit that myself and other known YouTubers have been saying for years. So
it is always helpful. I mean, it's just like, and I'm really grateful that you joined too, because you added so much more to the stream than I would have been able to give, because I don't understand this world at all. And so you were able to add a lot of color to it. And I think it's really great. But it's like, these people are so in their own world. They have no idea that normal people don't think like them. They don't talk like them. They don't care about identity. They don't care about who's stipping who. They don't care about what's in like between your legs. They don't care about any of this stuff. They just want a good story. And it's like, these people are trying to ruin everything.
Yeah, blatantly slow. And they're stuck. They admittedly have mentioned that they are stuck in an echo chamber and willingly not wanting to listen to fans. I'm like, look, I get it. The internet's a big place. Everyone has an asshole and an opinion. I get that 100%. You can't listen to everyone. You're not going to make everyone happy. But do your homework and respect the lore, and try for your damnedest, respect the fandom, because we pay your bills at the end of the day.
Man. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up for today, guys. I got to go read those Twitter files, and I suspect a lot of you do as well. But thank you again for joining me, Kino. I think if you'd ever be up for doing this again, just let me know. And now you know how to do it and everything, and it's not scary, and you did a great job. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, I just need to get a ring light now because I look like the chick from Willy Wonka turning violet. So
you look just fine. You did a great job.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the local community members on stream tonight, all the new people that Karlyn has acquired over the past week. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will see some of you tomorrow for Bitchcraft in Locals or Patreon at 3 p.m. And then we're doing movie night on Sunday. We might be doing a Sunday special stream on my main channel. Pay attention, keep an eye out, because I'll be announcing stuff. But guys, that's all we've got for tonight. Take care, and we'll see you soon. Bye.